In the dead of night, far from the eyes of ordinary men, shadows moved across stone walls carved with twisting shapes, their curves and coils seeming to writhe in the flickering torchlight. Somewhere deep beneath the grandeur of the world's greatest empires, in hidden chambers that have never been mapped on any modern atlas, secrets slithered silently, watched over by eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of kings. A whisper seemed to follow every step, a subtle, almost imperceptible hum of a presence older than empires themselves. It was the Serpent, the hidden architect of power, lurking in the unseen corners of history, patient and eternal. The story of this ancient religion, this secret order, begins not with kings or armies, but with the delicate, dangerous promise of knowledge that humans were never meant to hold. From the earliest civilizations along the Fertile Crescent, whispers spoke of serpents as symbols of wisdom and peril, guardians of hidden truths. They were neither wholly evil nor entirely benevolent. They were a mirror of the human soul, capable of cunning, of deception, of guidance, and of revelation. To see a serpent in the art of Sumer, in the carvings of Egypt, or in the sacred texts of distant lands was not simply to witness decoration. It was to glimpse a force that intertwined with the very foundation of power itself. And yet, those who recognized this power were few, chosen, and often silenced. To speak openly of the serpent was to court danger, for knowledge carries with it the weight of responsibility and the risk of annihilation. The earliest accounts, fragile as they are, suggest that entire societies were shaped in ways no one could have predicted, all under the subtle, unseen influence of this symbol. It is easy, in hindsight, to think of kings and rulers as the architects of history. But what if the truth is far stranger? What if the hands that guided them were hidden, invisible, and far older than the dynasties they sought to command? Ancient temples, long lost to the sands of time, once echoed with chants that no historian could fully translate, their words promising enlightenment to those brave enough to endure initiation. And yet, for every initiate who survived, countless others vanished, consumed not only by fear and secrecy, but by the very power they sought to understand. Legends tell of serpents guarding knowledge too dangerous for the common man, knowledge that could reshape the world if wielded by the wrong hands. Some say these legends were born from real events, that priests and seers, hidden from the gaze of ordinary citizens, held sway over empires. The pharaohs of Egypt, the kings of Babylon, even the rulers of faraway lands whose names have been erased by time, were not only leaders of armies and subjects, but also players in a game orchestrated by invisible hands. This was a power that transcended the limits of life and death, a hidden current flowing beneath the visible world, shaping the destinies of nations before they had even learned to name themselves. And there were whispers that this power was not bound by geography or era. Across deserts, mountains, and oceans, stories of serpents guarding sacred knowledge persisted, a strange resonance linking civilizations separated by thousands of miles and centuries. Did these cultures communicate, or did the serpent itself manifest repeatedly in human imagination, planting the same symbols, the same rituals, and the same warnings? Whatever the truth, it is undeniable that the serpent appeared where power flourished, in palaces, in temples, in the cryptic carvings of forgotten shrines. To follow its trail is to journey not just through history, but into the very heart of human desire, fear, and ambition. But the serpent does not reveal itself easily. Its influence is subtle, a question whispered at the right moment, a choice planted in the mind of a ruler, a secret preserved in stone and ink. For every visible triumph, There were hidden hands guiding the outcome, nudging the world in directions invisible to those who believed themselves in control. And for centuries, this order remained unchallenged, quietly shaping events while the world above assumed it understood the full story. Wars were fought, empires rose and fell, dynasties were built on ambition and blood. Yet beneath it all, a hidden order watched, waited, and directed with patience unmatched by time itself. As the torchlight flickers across these ancient carvings, a question rises in the mind. How much of history was truly shaped by the visible forces we are taught to revere, and how much by those who preferred to remain unseen? Every serpent etched in stone, every whispered legend, and every unexplained disappearance carries a hint of this hidden order. And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is this. Some claim that it is not entirely gone, that in the palaces and councils of the modern world, the influence of the serpent still slithers silently, unseen but undeniably present. The stage is set, the shadows deepened, and the torch flickers once more. What follows is a journey into a past entwined with secrecy, devotion, and peril. A journey that will reveal not only the hidden religion that guided every throne, but also the human hearts willing to risk everything for its knowledge. And as we begin this descent into history's hidden corridors, one question remains, echoing through time and darkness alike. What is the price of power when it is guided by a force older than kings, older than empires, older than memory itself? Long before the grand empires of Egypt or Babylon cast their shadows across history, humans looked to the natural world for signs of power and mystery. Among all creatures, none inspired fascination, fear, and reverence like the serpent. Its sinuous body, ever moving, ever watchful, seemed to embody both danger and wisdom. Across the fertile banks of rivers and the hidden corners of dense forests, early humans observed its patience, its lethal precision, and the way it appeared and vanished without warning. It was a creature that seemed to bridge the earthly and the divine, a living symbol of the unknown forces that shaped life itself. And it was from this primal recognition that the first serpent cults arose. The earliest evidence traces back to Mesopotamia, around 4000 BCE, where tiny clay tablets and figurines hint at ceremonies that honored serpentine deities. These symbols were not mere art. They were a language of power, a means of communicating with forces beyond human comprehension. Temples were constructed in obscure locations, often hidden from the general populace, where select individuals were entrusted with rituals that promised insight into life, death, and the very threads of fate. These early practitioners believed the serpent held keys to immortality and knowledge forbidden to the uninitiated. To touch its symbol, to perform its rites, was to engage directly with the currents that controlled existence itself. Egypt soon embraced its own serpentine worship, but with a new intensity and complexity. The uraeus, a rearing cobra adorning the crowns of pharaohs, was more than decoration. It was protection, authority, and divine mandate intertwined. To wear the serpent was to claim alignment with cosmic forces, to position oneself as the living bridge between gods and humans. Yet these were not symbols meant for public understanding. Only the priesthood, schooled in secret lore, could interpret their meaning fully. Every movement of the serpent in temple carvings, every depiction in tombs and scrolls, carried messages layered with centuries of hidden knowledge, often invisible to outsiders, yet meticulously preserved for those who were initiated. But the origins of the serpent cult were not confined to one land or culture. Across the Indian subcontinent, the Naga represented a similar blend of reverence and fear. These semi-divine beings, half human, half serpent, were guardians of water, knowledge, and treasures of the earth. Initiates into these traditions underwent rigorous spiritual and physical trials, often in secret, to align themselves with the Nagas' dual nature, wise yet dangerous, patient yet lethal. It is remarkable how, in distant lands, the serpent consistently appeared as a mediator between human aspiration and divine authority, a bridge to hidden truths, and a symbol of the perilous allure of power. What makes these early cults extraordinary is not only their devotion to the serpent, but the sophistication of their secrecy. They were not open societies. They operated in shadowed chambers, used cryptic symbols, and passed knowledge orally across generations. Initiates learned that knowledge carried a cost. Understanding the serpent's mysteries could elevate a human to unprecedented influence or destroy them entirely. The stakes were life and death, not only of the body but of the soul. These early believers understood that the serpent's wisdom was dangerous precisely because it revealed truths ordinary humans were ill-prepared to wield. The cult's influence, subtle as it was, extended beyond spiritual enlightenment. Its followers often held sway over kings and rulers, guiding decisions, advising on matters of life and war, and shaping the moral and political direction of entire communities. The snake was not just a symbol of power. It was a tool of influence, a code for understanding human behavior, and a map for controlling destiny. Empires that recognized its presence thrived, while those that ignored or desecrated it often fell to ruin, victims of miscalculation or unexplained misfortune. Even now, fragments of this knowledge survive in myths, stories, and art, their meaning obscured by time, but their presence undeniable. One of the most intriguing aspects of these ancient cults is their consistency across continents. Why did a snake symbolize wisdom and danger in Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and even Mesoamerica? Some scholars argue coincidence, but the repeating patterns suggest something more profound, a shared archetype, perhaps, or a hidden network of transmission lost to time. Initiates believe that the serpent was not merely a local deity, but a guardian of universal truths, a creature whose wisdom transcended geography, language, and culture. Its influence was global, invisible yet undeniable, shaping human history in ways no written record could fully capture. By the time the great empires of the ancient world rose, the serpent cult had already evolved into something formidable. A secret society with rituals, codes, and hierarchies designed to preserve its knowledge while wielding influence over kings, priests, and generals alike. Its followers became invisible architects of history, often credited with divine inspiration, foresight, or uncanny wisdom. Every temple, every ritual, and every hidden chamber was a testament to centuries of meticulous preservation. And yet, for all its sophistication, the cult's secrecy remained its greatest weapon. To expose, it was to invite danger. To underestimate, it was to fall victim to forces beyond understanding. As we trace the serpent's origin, a pattern emerges. Power, secrecy, and reverence are inseparable. Where the serpent is worshipped, history bends quietly beneath it. Where it is ignored, disaster waits. And the human fascination with this creature, stretching back thousands of years, reminds us that the allure of hidden knowledge is as ancient as civilization itself. The serpent is not merely a symbol of fear or wisdom. It is the embodiment of the risks and rewards of understanding forces beyond ordinary perception. Its story is entwined with every throne, every temple, and every human ambition that has dared to reach beyond the visible world. And as we begin to follow this path further, deeper into the shadows of history, one cannot help but wonder, did these ancient cults simply vanish, leaving only myths and carvings, or did they endure, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right hands to awaken their power once more? The answers may lie not in the texts we read, but in the patterns we have long ignored. The whispers, the symbols, and the coils of the serpent that still echo in the corridors of human desire. The world of the ancient serpent cult was not built on armies or monumental architecture alone. It thrived in whispers. Knowledge, more than gold or territory, was its most dangerous weapon. In dimly lit chambers, behind locked doors, initiates learned that words could shape empires as much as swords, that influence could be as lethal as any army. The serpent taught them patience, subtlety, and the art of guiding events without ever being seen. History, it seemed, was often written not by kings or generals, but by those who moved in silence, steering the ambitions of rulers with invisible hands. Evidence suggests that even in the earliest societies, individuals who understood the serpent's teachings held extraordinary power. Priests and advisors became invisible architects of politics, predicting outcomes, manipulating alliances, and orchestrating decisions that shaped the fates of nations. Their power was a dangerous secret. One misstep could bring death. One revelation could change the course of history. And the most chilling aspect was the very human cost. Those who were unprepared, who sought the knowledge for selfish gain or without discipline, often vanished under mysterious circumstances. In whispers passed from one initiate to another, warnings circulated. Power without wisdom is a curse. In Mesopotamia, the serpent's influence extended beyond the spiritual realm into governance. Kings consulted temple priests not only for divine guidance, but for advice on strategy, justice, and succession. The priests, trained in the cult's cryptic knowledge, held sway over entire populations while remaining invisible to the public eye. They understood human nature, fear, desire, ambition, and manipulated it with precision. Decisions that appeared spontaneous or divinely inspired were often the result of carefully guided advice, a subtle nudge in the direction the cult deemed necessary. In essence, the serpent's wisdom became a hidden hand in the shaping of civilization itself. Egypt, too, provides chilling examples of this quiet influence. Pharaohs were portrayed as absolute rulers, their divine authority unquestioned. Yet behind the throne, a network of priests and initiates ensured that the ruler's decisions aligned with ancient wisdom, including that of the serpent. Rituals, divinations, and secret councils governed the unseen machinery of power. The cobra on the crown was not merely symbolic. It was a reminder that even a king answered to forces older and wiser than himself. History records victories and defeats, expansions and collapses, but often the most consequential moments went unnoticed by ordinary citizens, shaped instead by whispered counsel in shadowed halls. And it was not just rulers who were affected. Military generals, merchants, and influential families were subtly guided by the cult's influence, often without knowing it. Bribes, alliances, omens, and prophecies were tools in a silent game. Those who appeared to act independently were often following a path already mapped by initiates. Some may call it conspiracy, others inevitability. The result was the same. History advanced under the guidance of a hidden order, a force whose existence was acknowledged only in hushed tones, and even then, only by the initiated. Yet the cult's power was not brute force. It was intellectual, psychological, and spiritual. Initiates learned to speak in coded language, to craft stories and rituals that concealed as much as they revealed. Symbols of the serpent were embedded in public life, in architecture, in art, and even in the layout of cities, often unnoticed by ordinary citizens. The most sophisticated strategy was invisibility itself, to be everywhere without being seen, to influence without leaving a trace. And the consequences of discovery were dire. Those who tried to expose the serpent's secrets often disappeared suddenly, their deaths attributed to accident, illness, or divine punishment. It became clear that the cult's power was maintained as much by fear as by knowledge. Across continents, a pattern emerges. Wherever power consolidated, whispers of the serpent followed. From the rivers of the Nile to the plains of Mesopotamia, from the mountains of India to temples long buried beneath jungles, the same principle applied. Those who knew the serpent's ways held influence far beyond what armies or wealth alone could achieve. And the most haunting truth is that much of this influence has left no trace in historical texts. It survives in myths, in legends, in symbols whose meanings have been obscured by time. The hidden order relied on subtlety and patience, trusting that generations would continue its work in secrecy, unseen but effective. It is also within this whispering world that human ambition collided with fear. Some who were drawn to the serpent sought only personal gain, only to find themselves overwhelmed by forces they could not control. Stories of betrayal, sudden deaths, and vanished heirs circulated quietly among those in the know. The serpent was as much a test as it was a guide, rewarding humility and punishing hubris. Those who succeeded became extraordinarily powerful. Those who failed vanished from history without record, leaving behind only faint traces of fear and mystery. As these whispers spread, the serpent became more than a symbol. It became a philosophy of power itself. Patience, discretion, and strategic vision were the tools of its followers. They understood that influence, when exercised subtly, could shape the destiny of nations without the need for open conflict. The real lesson of the serpent was that power without subtlety is fragile, and that the true rulers of history were not always those with crowns, swords, or armies, but those who moved unseen, whispering guidance, and shaping the world one decision at a time. By the end of this period, the serpent had become an invisible thread connecting rulers, priests, and warriors, a secret engine propelling history forward. The world as we know it, the rise of empires, the collapse of kingdoms, and the fate of civilizations, was influenced not only by visible forces, but by the subtle, careful guidance of a hidden order that understood the most human of truths. Power is most effective when it is invisible, and knowledge is the most dangerous weapon of all. And yet, the whispers continue. They echo in forgotten temples, in symbols etched in stone, and in stories that have survived only as myths. The question remains, how much of history, even the history we take for granted, has been quietly orchestrated by forces we cannot see? The serpent's influence, subtle and patient, has endured across time, a reminder that power and knowledge, when wielded in secrecy, can shape the course of humanity far more than armies or conquests ever could. Symbols are more than decoration. They're the language of the unseen, a cipher for those trained to read between the lines. The serpent, with its coiled body and ever-watchful eyes, was one of the most potent of these symbols. From the earliest temples to the walls of imperial palaces, it appeared repeatedly, in carvings, frescoes, and reliefs, a subtle reminder that power was guided by forces unseen. Ordinary observers might have seen only artistry, but to the initiated, each line and curve carried meaning, a message encoded for those who knew how to look. This hidden language was the backbone of the order, a way to preserve knowledge, communicate secrets, and exercise influence without drawing the attention of outsiders. The beauty of symbols lies in their ambiguity. A serpent can represent wisdom, danger, death, or rebirth, depending on context. Ancient societies understood this complexity intuitively. In Mesopotamia, the entwined serpents of the caduceus symbolized duality, life and death, chaos and order. In Egypt, the uraeus represented protection and divine authority. In India, the Naga guarded hidden knowledge, treasures, and sacred waters. Though geographically separated, these symbols share uncanny similarities, hinting at a universal understanding of the serpent's power. The repetition across continents suggests that this was no coincidence, but an intentional code, a subtle thread connecting civilizations through the language of the serpent. The order mastered the art of embedding these symbols where they could influence without revealing themselves. Temples were carefully designed so that the angles of statues, the curvature of columns, and the placement of carvings created a hidden geometry of power. In some cases, these arrangements aligned with celestial events, linking human rituals to the cosmos itself. Every architectural decision, every artistic detail was deliberate, crafted to convey lessons to the initiated and remain invisible to the uninitiated. Even the smallest detail could carry a warning, an instruction, or a clue to deeper knowledge, visible only to those who knew the key. Art and architecture were not the only mediums. Stories, myths, and folklore carry the serpent's messages through generations. Tales of cunning serpents, protective dragons, and mysterious guardians were never just fables. They were coded lessons. Initiates learned to interpret these narratives as guides to political strategy, moral judgment, and spiritual insight. A king might hear a story of a serpent who protected a treasure and recognize it as a metaphor for guarding sacred knowledge. A priest might read a mural depicting entwined snakes and understand it as a guide for a ritual yet to come. The language of symbols was subtle, versatile, and dangerous, revealing truths to the worthy and misleading the unprepared. One of the most intriguing aspects of this symbolic language is its ability to transcend time. Symbols carved thousands of years ago still resonate with hidden meanings today if one knows how to see them. The serpent motif appears in the carvings of forgotten temples, the designs of medieval manuscripts, and even in modern heraldry. Some researchers suggest that this continuity is evidence of a hidden network, a tradition of initiates passing down knowledge across centuries. Others argue that it is a natural archetype embedded in the human psyche. Either way, the repetition is remarkable, and it underscores the enduring influence of the order. The language of symbols also served as a tool of control. Those who could read the signs wielded power over those who could not. A carefully placed serpent carving could signal allegiance, warn of danger, or mark territory without a single word spoken. In some cases, misreading or ignoring these signs led to misfortune or even death. The order relied on this exclusivity, ensuring that knowledge was kept in the hands of the few, while the many remained unaware of the forces guiding them. In this way, the serpent became not only a symbol of wisdom, but also a mechanism for preserving secrecy and authority. Beyond individual influence, symbols connected entire societies to the hidden order. Temples, palaces, and sacred texts formed a network of encoded messages that guided civilizations for centuries. The placement of serpent imagery, the repetition of motifs, and the subtle alignment with natural and celestial phenomena all contributed to a larger narrative, one that ordinary history books barely touch. The serpent's language was a map, a guide, and a warning, carried across continents and epochs, shaping the course of human events in ways invisible to the untrained eye. Yet there was danger in this language. A misinterpreted symbol could lead to disastrous consequences. Those who sought to exploit the knowledge without proper training often found themselves caught in webs they could not understand. The order maintained strict initiation rituals and secrecy, ensuring that only those prepared for the knowledge's weight could interpret the signs correctly. Failure to respect this system often meant sudden disappearance, disgrace, or worse, a silent reminder that power is never without peril. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of this hidden language is its persistence. Millennia have passed, yet the serpent continues to appear, guiding those who are willing to see it. It is present in the carvings of temples lost to sand, in the stained glass of medieval cathedrals, and in the subtle symbols of modern architecture. It is a reminder that some knowledge endures, not through written records or public acclaim, but through symbols, whispers, and the vigilance of those committed to preserving a truth too dangerous for the masses. And so, as we study these hidden messages, a realization emerges. The serpent's language is not just a relic of the past. It is a living code, a bridge between human ambition and cosmic order, between secrecy and revelation. To understand it is to glimpse the forces that have quietly guided history, shaping events in ways both subtle and profound. And as the symbols reveal their secrets, one cannot help but wonder what other messages lie hidden in plain sight, waiting for those patient enough to see beyond the surface. The serpent's influence extended far beyond temples and hidden symbols. It slithered into the very veins of power, entwining itself with the bloodlines of kings, emperors, and dynasties. Across the ancient world, whispers suggested that rulers were not chosen solely by birthright, but by hidden rights, oaths, and alliances with secret orders that claimed knowledge older than any throne. To sit on a throne was to inherit not only lands and subjects, but also a connection to a lineage that traced back to a force unseen yet undeniably present. And it was the serpent, in its silent omnipresence, that ensured the continuity of this invisible power. In Mesopotamia, royal succession often involved more than mere inheritance. Kings were anointed in secret ceremonies conducted by priesthoods who claimed to understand the serpent's will. The rituals were shrouded in mystery, known only to a select few who had proven their loyalty and discretion. The king's authority, therefore, was not just political. It was spiritual, sanctioned by a hidden force that demanded obedience through fear, reverence, and subtle manipulation. To the outside world, the king's power appeared absolute and unquestionable, but behind closed doors, the serpent's guardians monitored every decision, guiding, warning, and, when necessary, correcting. Egyptian pharaohs provide a particularly vivid example of this intersection between bloodlines and hidden power. While they were publicly worshipped as gods, they were also deeply reliant on the counsel of priests and initiates who maintained the secrets of the serpent. Every crown, every scepter, every ceremonial act was layered with meaning, a reminder that the throne was not merely a seat of earthly authority, but a node in a vast network of unseen influence. In some cases, pharaohs were selected or overthrown not because of external conquest, but due to the judgments of those who controlled access to esoteric knowledge. To defy these unseen powers was to risk sudden death or disgrace, a lesson etched into history through countless mysterious disappearances. The notion of bloodlines guided by hidden knowledge was not unique to the Nile. In ancient India, royal dynasties claimed descent from divine serpents, the Naga, linking their right to rule to a cosmic and mystical authority. The serpent was both protector and arbiter, ensuring that only those who could uphold sacred principles inherited the crown. These legends were not mere myths. They encoded a belief system that emphasized loyalty, discretion, and alignment with the hidden currents of power. A ruler's legitimacy depended not only on lineage, but also on their willingness to respect and uphold the ancient secret that guided their predecessors. The fascination with serpentine bloodlines extended into Europe as well. Later historians and scholars have pointed to patterns in medieval monarchies that suggest a covert preservation of influence through carefully curated marriages, alliances, and mentorships, often linked to secret societies. While the records are sparse and sometimes speculative, the consistent theme emerges. Power was never entirely in the hands of those publicly recognized as rulers. Those who understood the serpent's teachings, who could interpret the signs and symbols left by generations before them, effectively shaped dynasties, ensured succession, and guided empires from the shadows. What makes this hidden influence so compelling is the human element. Ambition, fear, loyalty, and betrayal played out within these secret networks as much as on battlefields or in courts. Princes and kings who underestimated the power behind the serpent sometimes found their reigns cut short in inexplicable ways. Heirs deemed unworthy vanished mysteriously, while those who proved astute, patient, and discreet ascended beyond expectations. History records many deaths and overthrows as accidents or divine retribution, but the serpent's hand, subtle and invisible, may have been orchestrating the outcomes all along. The secretive nature of these bloodlines ensured the survival of the order across generations. Knowledge was passed not to the masses, but to a select few, often through oral instruction, coded texts, or symbolic artifacts. Children born into noble families were observed and guided carefully, taught the language of power and the significance of the serpent in ways invisible to ordinary eyes. The ritualized control over succession and education ensured that the order maintained influence regardless of political upheaval. Even when dynasties fell, the knowledge survived, migrating quietly into new hands, preserving continuity across time. And yet, the serpent demanded more than loyalty. It demanded integrity and vision. Those who sought to exploit its influence for personal gain without understanding the depth of its wisdom often found themselves consumed by it. Stories of ambition leading to sudden downfall were not uncommon. Princes who ignored warnings, kings who dismissed subtle signs, and heirs who betrayed the order faced consequences that history recorded as accidents, betrayals, or mysterious deaths. The human cost of hidden knowledge was immense, and the serpent's discipline was uncompromising. This intricate network of bloodlines and hidden guidance also shaped international relations. Royal marriages, alliances, and political maneuvers were often orchestrated to maintain access to secret knowledge or to preserve the continuity of the order's influence. Wars were fought not merely over territory or resources, but to protect or control the knowledge that resided within these families. The serpent's presence, though unseen, was a silent force behind diplomatic tables, whispered advice, and the subtle arrangements that determined the fate of entire nations. As centuries passed, the symbolism of the serpent evolved alongside the bloodlines it guided. Its image appeared in heraldry, royal seals, and private sigils, signaling allegiance to the hidden order. Even when dynasties were overthrown or empires collapsed, these symbols survived, a subtle testament to continuity and influence. Those who recognized the signs understood the rules of engagement in a world where visible power was only a fraction of the truth. They knew that the real game was not played on battlefields or in public courts, but in quiet chambers, where knowledge, discretion, and patience determined who would sit on the throne next. By understanding these bloodlines, one begins to see history in a different light. Kings and queens, emperors and princes, were not always the architects of their own destinies. They were participants in a story much larger than themselves, guided by knowledge preserved for millennia and safeguarded by the Serpent. The twists and turns of dynastic succession, the sudden rises and falls of rulers, and the patterns that seem too precise to be coincidental all suggest a force that has quietly shaped human history from the shadows. As we move from bloodlines into the hidden priesthoods and the custodians of these secrets, a chilling realization emerges. Power has never been as straightforward as it appears. Thrones and crowns may change hands, empires may rise and fall, but the invisible hand guiding them remains, patient and enduring, a silent testament to the cunning and timeless influence of the Serpent. And as we peer deeper into these hidden corridors of power, one question lingers. How many rulers throughout history were truly in control, and how many were mere instruments of a force older, wiser, and far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend? While kings and dynasties carried the visible mantle of power, the true architects of influence often remained unseen, concealed behind thick stone walls and whispered rituals. The priests of the Serpent cult were not merely spiritual leaders. They were the custodians of knowledge older than empires, keepers of codes, symbols, and ceremonies that shaped the course of human history. Their authority was invisible yet absolute. A ruler might command armies or issue decrees, but the priests controlled the very framework of understanding, guiding decisions with subtlety that ordinary mortals could neither perceive nor resist. Initiation into this inner circle was both a privilege and a trial. Candidates were tested physically, mentally, and spiritually. They endured challenges that sought to break arrogance, expose fear, and cultivate a mind capable of navigating the delicate threads of hidden influence. The Serpent demanded patience, discretion, and resilience. Those who failed often vanished mysteriously, their absence attributed to accident, divine wrath, or political intrigue. Those who succeeded gained a key to a world few could even imagine, a world in which knowledge itself was power and secrecy was survival. The priests were masters of psychological insight. They studied human behavior, ambition, and desire with the precision of a surgeon. Kings were guided, generals counseled, and citizens manipulated, often without their awareness. The power of the order lay not in force, but in perception, the ability to shape events, to plant ideas, to orchestrate outcomes from the shadows. Every symbol, every ritual, every hidden chamber served a purpose in a grand design that sought to maintain the balance of influence while preserving the order's secrecy. The Serpent, coiled and watchful, was their emblem, a constant reminder of the vigilance required to wield such power responsibly. The influence of the priesthood extended across civilizations. In Egypt, they advised pharaohs on matters of state, war, and succession, their guidance encoded in elaborate ceremonies and sacred texts. In Mesopotamia, they interpreted omens and maintained rituals that seemingly governed the fate of entire cities. In India, the Naga priests acted as both spiritual guides and political strategists, ensuring that rulers aligned with the cosmic and earthly order. Across continents, the pattern repeats. Those who understood the Serpent guided history, while those who did not were swept aside by forces they could neither see nor understand. Yet, the priests were not purely servants of power for its own sake. Their role carried profound moral and philosophical weight. Knowledge without wisdom was dangerous, they believed, and authority without ethical guidance led to ruin. The serpent's teachings emphasized balance: protect the innocent, guide the ambitious, and ensure that power served the larger pattern of order. Those who broke these principles faced consequences as severe as those imposed on the uninitiated. History is scattered with stories of high priests disappearing under mysterious circumstances, reminding both rulers and priests that the serpent demanded respect above all else. One of the most remarkable aspects of the priesthood was its ability to preserve continuity across centuries. Civilizations fell, dynasties collapsed, and cities were razed, yet the knowledge endured. Scrolls, artifacts, symbols, and oral traditions were carefully guarded, often hidden in labyrinthine temples, secret chambers, or remote locations. The priests acted as both archivists and strategists, ensuring that even in times of chaos, the order's influence remained intact. They were the invisible scaffolding of power, holding together empires that might have otherwise crumbled under the weight of human ambition and folly. The priesthood also served as a bridge between the human and the divine. They mediated between rulers and higher knowledge, interpreting signs, omens, and celestial alignments. Their rituals were designed to synchronize human decisions with cosmic forces, to ensure that power was exercised with precision and foresight. Every coronation, treaty, and military campaign could carry layers of meaning, orchestrated with the subtle guidance of these unseen experts. The serpent symbolized both their wisdom and the danger inherent in knowledge, a reminder that mastery of power was inseparable from the discipline to wield it responsibly. But the priests were not immune to corruption or ambition. History suggests that internal rivalries, secret alliances, and betrayals were common within the inner circles. Those who sought personal gain risked destabilizing the order itself. The serpent's teachings demanded vigilance, for one unworthy initiate could unravel centuries of careful guidance. This tension between loyalty and ambition added an almost cinematic drama to the priesthood, a constant interplay of human desire against the weight of timeless knowledge, each decision carrying consequences that echoed across kingdoms and generations. Even today, fragments of this priestly influence can be traced in hidden architectural designs, ancient manuscripts, and enigmatic symbols preserved in art, literature, and ceremonial traditions. While the public perceives history as the story of visible rulers, the silent influence of these priests lingers, a hidden current shaping events, decisions, and ideologies. The serpent remains their emblem, a reminder that what is seen is rarely the full story, and that true power often lies in the hands of those who choose to remain in the shadows. As we follow the trail of the priests, one cannot help but marvel at the precision and patience required to sustain such influence over millennia. It is a testament to human ingenuity and the seductive power of knowledge. Every whispered lesson, every hidden symbol, and every secret ritual was part of a broader design, ensuring that history unfolded according to a plan that few could comprehend. And yet, the serpent's presence was always a reminder. The pursuit of knowledge carries both reward and peril, and even the most powerful can be humbled if they fail to respect the forces guiding them. The priests behind the curtain are the unsung architects of history, weaving human ambition, divine insight, and the lessons of the serpent into a tapestry that shaped civilizations. Their story is a blend of brilliance, danger, and devotion, a reminder that history is rarely as simple as it appears. Thrones rise and fall, empires collapse, and rulers fade into memory, yet the influence of those who understand the hidden currents persists. The serpent watches still, and the priests continue their silent vigil, preserving the knowledge that has guided humanity for thousands of years. And as we leave the chambers of the priests and move toward the temples where their influence was most visible, one question lingers. If these hidden custodians could shape the destinies of kings and nations, what other secrets have remained unseen, guiding the course of history in ways we are only beginning to comprehend? In the sun-scorched lands of ancient Egypt, the serpent was far more than a symbol. It was a living force woven into the very fabric of life and death. From the sands of the desert to the marble halls of Karnak and Luxor, serpents appeared as guardians, judges, and teachers. The uraeus, a rearing cobra on the crowns of pharaohs, signified divine authority, protection, and the invisible guidance of the hidden order. But these serpents were more than ornamentation. They were reminders that the ruler's power was never solely his own. It flowed from knowledge older than the Nile, from rituals performed in secret chambers, and from the silent vigilance of priesthoods who understood the serpent's eternal presence. The temples of Egypt were designed not only as places of worship, but as repositories of hidden wisdom. Walls carved with serpentine motifs and reliefs depicted ceremonies whose meaning was clear only to the initiated. These sacred spaces were aligned with celestial patterns, connecting the actions of humans to cosmic rhythms. A ritual performed at the right time, in the right place, could influence harvests, military campaigns, or the outcome of political rivalries. The serpent, coiled and watchful, was the constant guardian of this knowledge, ensuring that only those trained in its language could wield its power responsibly. Priests held an extraordinary role in maintaining this balance. They interpreted signs from the heavens, read omens in the movement of serpents, and guided the pharaoh in decisions that appeared divinely inspired to the public. In truth, these priests orchestrated events behind the scenes, using rituals, symbols, and strategic counsel to shape the course of the kingdom. Their influence was subtle yet absolute. A single warning whispered at the right moment could alter a military campaign. A carefully timed ritual could reinforce a ruler's authority or warn of hidden danger. Every action, every decision, was part of a delicate dance choreographed by the unseen hand of the serpent. The serpent also represented duality, life and death, creation and destruction, protection and judgment. In funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, serpents appeared as guides for the soul, protectors against chaos, and symbols of renewal. Pharaohs and nobles understood that their reigns were temporary, their authority fragile, and that alignment with these cosmic truths was essential for survival. The serpent's presence in tombs, pyramids, and sacred objects was a reminder that earthly power was inseparable from spiritual responsibility, and that the wisdom of the hidden order extended beyond life itself. The impact of the serpent on Egypt's political structure was profound. Kings who aligned with its guidance prospered, their reigns marked by stability, expansion, and monumental achievement. Those who ignored its warnings often fell victim to mysterious misfortune, sudden deaths, failed campaigns, or internal rebellions. To the ordinary observer, these events might seem coincidental or the result of divine will. To those who understood the serpent, they were deliberate consequences, outcomes carefully orchestrated by a secretive order that had mastered the subtle art of influence. Beyond politics, the serpent's influence touched the personal lives of rulers and citizens alike. Initiation into sacred rites was reserved for a select few who demonstrated discipline, loyalty, and an understanding of hidden knowledge. These initiates became conduits, extending the serpent's guidance into every corner of society. Their training was rigorous. They learned to interpret symbols, align actions with cosmic patterns, and influence human behavior with precision. The serpent's lessons were demanding, teaching patience, observation, and the consequences of hubris. Those who failed to respect these principles often vanished without trace, reinforcing the cult's aura of mystery and fear. Architecture itself served as a silent message. Temples and pyramids encoded layers of knowledge in their layout, proportions, and alignment. Serpentine carvings, hidden chambers, and concealed inscriptions preserved centuries of wisdom, ensuring continuity even as dynasties rose and fell. Ordinary citizens might see only grandeur. Only initiates could read the subtle cues that conveyed instructions, warnings, and spiritual truths. The serpent, eternally coiled, was both guide and guardian, protecting knowledge from those who lacked the discipline to understand it. The rituals performed within these sacred spaces were more than ceremonial. They were acts of influence and preservation. Priests conducted complex rites to harmonize the pharaoh's authority with cosmic forces, invoking protection, insight, and divine favor. Every chant, gesture, and alignment carried layered meaning, connecting earthly decisions to a larger, unseen design. The serpent's presence was felt not only as a symbol, but as an active force, guiding the hands and minds of those who participated. The line between ritual and strategy blurred, revealing a sophisticated system of control that shaped both human and natural events. And yet, despite its power, the serpent demanded humility. Pharaohs who overstepped, who ignored the counsel of priests or misused the knowledge, risked catastrophe. The dual nature of the serpent, protective yet dangerous, was ever present. It rewarded understanding, patience, and wisdom, but punished arrogance, impatience, and misuse of knowledge. Tales of rulers who fell abruptly, their reigns cut short by inexplicable events, underscore the human cost of failing to respect the forces guiding power. History records their demise, but only the serpent's initiates understood the subtle orchestration behind it. Even today, the legacy of Egypt's eternal serpent endures. Temples, tombs, and artifacts preserve traces of a wisdom that has survived millennia. The uraeus, carved into crowns or painted on walls, is not merely a symbol, but a message from a secret tradition that continues to influence human understanding of power, fate, and responsibility. By studying these remnants, we glimpse a world in which knowledge, secrecy, and subtle influence were paramount, and in which the unseen guided the visible with an unyielding hand. As we step away from the temples and into the broader reaches of history, one truth becomes clear. Egypt's serpent was not an isolated phenomenon. Its lessons, symbols, and hidden influence spread across continents and centuries, leaving a trail of subtle guidance in kingdoms, dynasties, and secret orders alike. The eternal serpent watches still, a timeless presence reminding us that true power often lies hidden, patiently shaping the course of humanity from the shadows. While Egypt preserved the serpent's wisdom in stone and ritual, other civilizations across the world nurtured their own variations of this ancient power. The serpent's symbolism appeared independently, yet with strikingly similar meaning. A guardian, a teacher, a hidden force influencing rulers and societies alike. From the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the jungles of Mesoamerica, from the mountains of India to the plains of China, serpents manifested as sacred intermediaries between the mortal and the divine, a shared language of secrecy and authority that transcended geography. In Mesopotamia, serpents embodied duality, creation and destruction, chaos and order. Ancient texts depict entwined serpents guarding sacred knowledge, and temple reliefs show priests invoking their guidance to influence kings and city-states. These serpents were not mere decoration. They encoded strategies, warnings, and moral lessons for those trained to read them. The caduceus, an entwined pair of serpents, symbolized balance, negotiation, and the hidden architecture of influence. Priests interpreted these signs, guiding rulers in ways that appeared divine yet were rooted in centuries of esoteric knowledge. Meanwhile, in the Indian subcontinent, the Naga were revered as semi-divine serpents, guardians of water, fertility, and hidden treasures. Temples and shrines dedicated to these beings were often secluded, accessible only to initiates who understood the symbolism and ritual. The Naga were not passive figures. They tested, guided, and punished, teaching that power and knowledge were inseparable from responsibility and discipline. Kings who aligned themselves with these sacred serpents secured not only divine favor, but a direct link to the hidden forces shaping their kingdoms. Failure to respect these lessons, as legends repeatedly warn, led to sudden loss, catastrophe, or mysterious deaths, reinforcing the duality of reward and risk inherent in esoteric wisdom. Mesoamerica provides another fascinating parallel. The feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, combines serpentine wisdom with celestial authority, bridging the earthly and divine realms. Temples dedicated to this deity contained secret chambers and coded iconography that guided rulers in the governance of their city-states. Initiates trained in the feathered serpent's symbolism understood how to navigate politics, spirituality, and even warfare, wielding influence invisible to those outside the order. The recurrence of serpent imagery in these far-flung cultures challenges the notion of coincidence, suggesting either a shared archetypal understanding or a hidden network of knowledge that spanned continents and centuries. Even in China, serpents and dragons symbolized wisdom, protection, and cosmic balance. Imperial courts often employed diviners and advisors who interpreted celestial signs and symbols, guiding emperors in matters of state. The dragon, though culturally distinct from the Western serpent, shared the same dual nature, benevolent and destructive, visible and hidden, a reminder that rulership required alignment with forces beyond human understanding. Those who ignored these signs frequently faced disaster, reinforcing the principle that true power was inseparable from insight and subtle guidance. The striking consistency of serpent symbolism across civilizations raises profound questions. Why did societies separated by oceans and mountains develop such similar interpretations? Was it instinctive, a reflection of the human psyche's recognition of the serpent's duality? Or was there an ancient transmission of knowledge, lost to history, but preserved in symbols, rituals, and myths? Regardless of the answer, the result is undeniable. The serpent became a universal emblem of hidden authority, shaping rulers, influencing decisions, and guiding societies from behind the scenes. Initiates and priests across continents shared common practices. Secrecy, discipline, and initiation were central. They learned to interpret symbols, align actions with cosmic or natural cycles, and influence human behavior without visibility. Failure brought swift consequences, reinforcing the principle that knowledge was not neutral, but dangerous in untrained hands. This universal pattern of education, secrecy, and moral accountability ensured the survival of serpent-based influence, even as empires rose and fell. The serpent was both a test and a teacher, rewarding patience and insight while punishing arrogance and ignorance. Trade routes, migrations, and conquests may have facilitated subtle exchanges of this knowledge. While civilizations often evolved independently, scholars have found hints of shared iconography, ritual similarities, and overlapping myths that suggest some degree of communication or parallel development of esoteric understanding. The serpent, coiled and eternal, became a unifying symbol, silently linking cultures that otherwise appeared disconnected. It was a reminder that human civilization, though fragmented by geography, shared fundamental truths about power, influence, and the risks of hidden knowledge. The serpent's influence was not static. It evolved with the cultures it touched. In some regions, it became a moral guide. In others, a symbol of protection or cosmic alignment. Its teachings adapted to local traditions, yet its core principles remained: patience, discretion, alignment with greater forces, and the understanding that knowledge carries consequences. Those who mastered these lessons gained extraordinary insight and influence, shaping events that seemed inevitable to the uninitiated but were carefully orchestrated by hidden hands. The universal presence of the serpent also emphasizes the fragility of visible power. Thrones, armies, and wealth can be ephemeral, but knowledge preserved through secrecy endures. Across continents and centuries, the serpent's lessons were carried forward by those who understood its significance, ensuring that influence persisted even when empires collapsed, dynasties fell, and civilizations disappeared. The serpent was patient, enduring, and unyielding, a timeless guardian of hidden truth. As we leave these distant civilizations and turn toward Europe, a new chapter begins. The serpent's influence migrating into medieval courts, secret orders, and hidden societies. Though the continents are different, the lessons remain consistent. Power without understanding is fragile. Knowledge carries both reward and peril, and the invisible hand of the serpent continues to guide those who can perceive it. The story of the serpent is not bound by geography. It is the story of humanity's constant dance with hidden wisdom, temptation, and the subtle shaping of destiny. As the serpent's influence traveled across continents, it found fertile ground in medieval Europe, a land of castles, cathedrals, and courts ripe for hidden guidance. Here, it manifested through secret orders, cloistered monasteries, and clandestine councils that preserved ancient wisdom, blending it with Christian and pagan traditions. The serpent became a symbol of hidden authority, bridging the gap between divine right and practical power. While kings and nobles wielded swords and minted coins, the true manipulators of history often acted behind curtains, cloaked in ritual, prayer, and secrecy. Among the most notorious of these groups were orders whose names have survived as whispers: the Templars, the Rosicrucians, and other clandestine fraternities whose influence extended far beyond their public missions. The Templars, publicly a knightly order devoted to protecting pilgrims, concealed within their ranks an extensive network of knowledge, ritual, and strategic counsel. They guarded secrets of finance, warfare, and esoteric wisdom, understanding that influence, when wielded subtly, could outlast armies. Their reputation for discipline, secrecy, and wealth made them a formidable hidden force, feared by kings and envied by peers. Rituals and symbols played a central role in these orders. Serpentine imagery, cryptic inscriptions, and ceremonial rites encoded guidance for initiates while remaining indecipherable to outsiders. The serpent, coiled and watchful, reminded members of the delicate balance between ambition and wisdom. The initiation process was rigorous. Members underwent trials that tested loyalty, intelligence, and moral fortitude. Only those deemed capable could access deeper teachings, ensuring that knowledge remained protected and misused only at great personal risk. Stories of members disappearing or meeting mysterious ends reinforced the seriousness of their commitment. The order's influence reached into the highest echelons of power. Kings and queens often sought the counsel of these secretive societies, unaware that their advice came from initiates trained in ancient wisdom, connecting Europe to traditions older than Rome itself. Strategic marriages, alliances, and territorial negotiations were often guided by principles passed down from generations who understood the subtle art of influence. Battles won or lost, treaties signed, and dynasties preserved were as much the result of these hidden actors as of any visible ruler. In essence, Europe became a chessboard, and the Serpent's priests the unseen players orchestrating moves from the shadows. The Templars were only one example. Across Europe, smaller brotherhoods and guilds operated with similar secrecy, maintaining libraries, artifacts, and rituals that carried forward ancient knowledge. Some merged Christian mysticism with pagan symbols, creating a synthesis that concealed the Serpent's teachings beneath layers of acceptable tradition. These groups understood that knowledge alone was insufficient. Influence required patience, timing, and discretion. A misstep could bring ruin not only to individuals, but to entire networks of power carefully maintained over decades. Financial control was another tool of influence. The Templars, for example, developed early banking systems, extending credit to monarchs and controlling wealth in ways invisible to the public. This economic leverage, combined with spiritual authority and strategic guidance, made them exceptionally powerful. The hidden orders understood that controlling the flow of money, symbols, and information allowed them to shape events more effectively than armies ever could. They became the invisible scaffolding supporting kingdoms, ensuring continuity and stability according to principles the uninitiated could neither see nor comprehend. The blending of secrecy, symbolism, and moral responsibility created an environment both captivating and perilous. Initiates were constantly reminded that knowledge carried consequences. Ambition without discipline, curiosity without preparation, or betrayal of the order could result in sudden death or social obliteration. The world of the ancient serpent cult was not built on armies or monumental architecture alone. It thrived in whispers. Knowledge, more than gold or territory, was its most dangerous weapon. In dimly lit chambers, behind locked doors, initiates learned that words could shape empires as much as swords, that influence could be as lethal as any army. The serpent taught them patience, subtlety, and the art of guiding events without ever being seen. History, it seemed, was often written not by kings or generals, but by those who moved in silence, steering the ambitions of rulers with invisible hands. Evidence suggests that even in the earliest societies, individuals who understood the serpent's teachings held extraordinary power. Priests and advisors became invisible architects of politics, predicting outcomes, manipulating alliances, and orchestrating decisions that shaped the fates of nations. Their power was a dangerous secret. One misstep could bring death. One revelation could change the course of history. And the most chilling aspect was the very human cost. Those who were unprepared, who sought the knowledge for selfish gain or without discipline, often vanished under mysterious circumstances. In whispers passed from one initiate to another, warnings circulated. Power without wisdom is a curse. In Mesopotamia, the serpent's influence extended beyond the spiritual realm into governance. Kings consulted temple priests not only for divine guidance, but for advice on strategy, justice, and succession. The priests, trained in the cult's cryptic knowledge, held sway over entire populations while remaining invisible to the public eye. They understood human nature, fear, desire, ambition, and manipulated it with precision. Decisions that appeared spontaneous or divinely inspired were often the result of carefully guided advice, a subtle nudge in the direction the cult deemed necessary. In essence, the serpent's wisdom became a hidden hand in the shaping of civilization itself. Egypt, too, provides chilling examples of this quiet influence. Pharaohs were portrayed as absolute rulers, their divine authority unquestioned. Yet behind the throne, a network of priests and initiates ensured that the ruler's decisions aligned with ancient wisdom, including that of the serpent. Rituals, divinations, and secret councils governed the unseen machinery of power. The cobra on the crown was not merely symbolic. It was a reminder that even a king answered to forces older and wiser than himself. History records victories and defeats, expansions and collapses, but often the most consequential moments went unnoticed by ordinary citizens, shaped instead by whispered counsel in shadowed halls. And it was not just rulers who were affected. Military generals, merchants, and influential families were subtly guided by the cult's influence, often without knowing it. Bribes, alliances, omens, and prophecies were tools in a silent game. Those who appeared to act independently were often following a path already mapped by initiates. Some may call it conspiracy, others inevitability. The result was the same. History advanced under the guidance of a hidden order, a force whose existence was acknowledged only in hushed tones, and even then, only by the initiated. Yet the cult's power was not brute force. It was intellectual, psychological, and spiritual. Initiates learned to speak in coded language, to craft stories and rituals that concealed as much as they revealed. Symbols of the serpent were embedded in public life, in architecture, in art, and even in the layout of cities, often unnoticed by ordinary citizens. The most sophisticated strategy was invisibility itself, to be everywhere without being seen, to influence without leaving a trace. And the consequences of discovery were dire. Those who tried to expose the serpent's secrets often disappeared suddenly, their deaths attributed to accident, illness, or divine punishment. It became clear that the cult's power was maintained as much by fear as by knowledge. Across continents, a pattern emerges. Wherever power consolidated, whispers of the serpent followed. From the rivers of the Nile to the plains of Mesopotamia, from the mountains of India to temples long buried beneath jungles, the same principle applied. Those who knew the serpent's ways held influence far beyond what armies or wealth alone could achieve. And the most haunting truth is that much of this influence has left no trace in historical texts. It survives in myths, in legends, in symbols whose meanings have been obscured by time. The hidden order relied on subtlety and patience, trusting that generations would continue its work in secrecy, unseen but effective. It is also within this whispering world that human ambition collided with fear. Some who were drawn to the serpent sought only personal gain, only to find themselves overwhelmed by forces they could not control. Stories of betrayal, sudden deaths, and vanished heirs circulated quietly among those in the know. The serpent was as much a test as it was a guide, rewarding humility and punishing hubris. Those who succeeded became extraordinarily powerful. Those who failed vanished from history without record, leaving behind only faint traces of fear and mystery. As these whispers spread, the serpent became more than a symbol. It became a philosophy of power itself. Patience, discretion, and strategic vision were the tools of its followers. They understood that influence, when exercised subtly, could shape the destiny of nations without the need for open conflict. The real lesson of the serpent was that power without subtlety is fragile, and that the true rulers of history were not always those with crowns, swords, or armies, but those who moved unseen, whispering guidance, and shaping the world one decision at a time. By the end of this period, the serpent had become an invisible thread connecting rulers, priests, and warriors, a secret engine propelling history forward. The world as we know it, the rise of empires, the collapse of kingdoms, and the fate of civilizations, was influenced not only by visible forces but by the subtle, careful guidance of a hidden order that understood the most human of truths. Power is most effective when it is invisible, and knowledge is the most dangerous weapon of all. And yet, the whispers continue. They echo in forgotten temples, in symbols etched in stone, and in stories that have survived only as myths. The question remains, how much of history, even the history we take for granted, has been quietly orchestrated by forces we cannot see? The serpent's influence, subtle and patient, has endured across time, a reminder that power and knowledge, when wielded in secrecy, can shape the course of humanity far more than armies or conquests ever could. Not all influence required secret chambers or whispered oaths. In medieval and early modern Europe, the serpent's power often hid in plain sight, embedded in architecture, art, and public ritual. Cathedrals, palaces, and civic buildings were adorned with carvings, stained glass, and frescoes that conveyed messages only decipherable to those trained in the hidden language. A coiled serpent etched into a column, a twisted vine framing a royal seal, or a subtle pattern in a tapestry might appear decorative to the casual observer. But for initiates, these symbols communicated guidance, warnings, or allegiances. The public saw beauty. The initiated saw a map of influence. Art served as both a record and a teaching tool. Painters and sculptors, often working under patronage, were sometimes initiates themselves, embedding lessons and instructions within their work. Religious iconography frequently featured serpentine forms, symbolizing wisdom, protection, and the dual nature of power. A painting of a saint conquering a dragon, a relief of entwined creatures in a chapel, or a sculpture of a serpent winding around a pillar was rarely random. Each motif reflected principles of control, morality, and cosmic balance, offering instruction to those capable of interpreting the language while leaving the uninitiated unaware of the deeper meaning. The architecture of Europe's great cathedrals also contained hidden designs aligned with ancient wisdom. Floor plans, window placements, and sculptural motifs were carefully orchestrated to create geometrical patterns, sometimes aligned with astronomical events. Initiates understood that these alignments were more than aesthetic. They linked earthly decisions to cosmic rhythms, ensuring rulers and clergy acted in harmony with forces beyond human comprehension. The serpent's presence, subtly integrated into arches, spires, and ornamentation, reminded observers of the invisible influence shaping both physical and spiritual realms. Rituals performed in public or semi-public spaces further concealed the order's activity. Festivals, processions, and ceremonies contained encoded sequences of movement and symbolism. For the untrained eye, these were merely celebrations or displays of piety. For initiates, they were lessons in timing, behavior, and social influence. Even the positioning of participants, the objects carried, or the cadence of chants could carry hidden meaning, subtly reinforcing hierarchy, allegiance, and obedience. In effect, the serpent guided both public perception and private action, invisibly molding society from within its own structures. Seals and heraldry were another medium for hidden communication. Royal families, merchant guilds, and noble houses often incorporated serpentine imagery, intertwined patterns, and subtle symbols into coats of arms, crests, and official documents. These symbols served dual purposes, affirming legitimacy to the public while conveying messages to those who understood the order's codes. A seal that appeared purely decorative might signal loyalty, reveal secret alliances, or provide guidance for strategic decisions. The serpent's language was thus embedded in the very identity of influential families, silently maintaining continuity and control across generations. The concept of secrecy in plain sight extended to literature and manuscripts. Illuminated texts, almanacs, and religious writings contained veiled lessons, encoded messages, and metaphors that only the initiated could interpret fully. Writers sometimes embedded symbolic sequences, allegories, or pictorial ciphers to communicate with allies across vast distances. A story of a serpent guarding a treasure, for example, might serve as both moral instruction and practical guidance on safeguarding knowledge or property. Knowledge was never lost entirely. It was concealed beneath layers of narrative, accessible only to those capable of seeing beyond the surface. Even everyday objects were sometimes carriers of hidden meaning. Jewelry, ceremonial garb, and decorative household items occasionally featured coiled serpents, intertwining vines, or subtle geometric patterns. While these seemed ornamental, they reinforced loyalty, knowledge, or caution. Initiates recognized these items as reminders of their duties, symbols of protection, or cues to action. Ordinary citizens might never suspect that the design of a clasp, a tapestry border, or a ring contained centuries-old wisdom, silently guiding behavior and allegiance. The persistence of these symbols over centuries demonstrates the adaptability and subtlety of the serpent's influence. While the public perception of power shifted with dynasties, wars, and revolutions, the hidden principles guiding rulers and societies endured. The serpent's presence reminded those who understood that visible authority was only one layer of reality. True influence relied on observation, interpretation, and alignment with the hidden forces encoded in culture, ritual, and art. Those who failed to recognize this often underestimated the depth of the forces shaping history. The danger of misinterpretation was ever present. Symbols in plain sight could be misunderstood, ignored, or deliberately twisted by ambitious individuals seeking power without proper guidance. The serpent's dual nature, protective yet potentially destructive, ensured that misuse carried consequences. History contains numerous examples of rulers, advisors, and merchants who ignored subtle cues and suffered sudden reversals of fortune. The lessons embedded in architecture, art, and ritual served as both guidance and warning, emphasizing that knowledge without respect could be fatal. By studying these symbols today, historians, scholars, and seekers gain insight into a hidden layer of European society that shaped the course of politics, culture, and spiritual life. The serpent's language is a bridge across centuries, connecting public displays to private guidance, visible power to invisible influence, and ordinary lives to cosmic or strategic principles. Its endurance reminds us that the forces guiding humanity are rarely entirely visible, often encoded in patterns we overlook daily. As we transition from these subtle European signals to the clandestine movements of global networks, one truth becomes undeniable. The serpent has never been confined to temples or secret chambers. It thrives in plain sight, quietly guiding decisions, shaping allegiances, and ensuring that the principles of hidden influence continue to operate across generations and continents. Even when invisible, its power persists, silently watching, guiding, and rewarding those who understand its language. Throughout history, The serpent's wisdom required careful protection. Empires crumbled, dynasties fell, and revolutions erupted, yet the hidden knowledge endured, preserved by a network of guardians dedicated to its survival. These custodians were not always visible or celebrated. They lived quietly in monasteries, libraries, and private chambers, entrusted with secrets older than kingdoms. Their mission was to ensure that the lessons of the serpent, discipline, discretion, and the delicate balance of power survived the chaos of human ambition and the passage of time. Guardianship demanded patience and vigilance. Knowledge was fragmented, encoded in symbols, manuscripts, and rituals. Initiates were trained to read signs invisible to the uninitiated, decipher allegories, and interpret cosmic or strategic cues. These skills required not only intelligence, but moral fortitude, for power without ethics risked collapse. Many guardians took vows of silence and secrecy, dedicating their lives to the preservation of wisdom rather than personal advancement. Their loyalty was measured not by wealth or status, but by fidelity to the principles of the serpent and the continuity of influence across generations. Libraries and archives were essential to this preservation. Manuscripts were meticulously copied, often coded with symbols, diagrams, or hidden text to prevent misuse. Some texts were hidden in walls, behind altars, or beneath temple floors, accessible only to those initiated in the serpent's teachings. Knowledge was never centralized, for concentration increased risk. Instead, it was dispersed, safeguarded by multiple guardians across continents. Even if one archive was destroyed, the wisdom could survive elsewhere, hidden in plain sight or buried deep in secrecy. The guardians also monitored human ambition. They advised rulers, princes, and influential figures, often indirectly, using intermediaries, coded correspondence, or ritual guidance. A king might attribute a successful decision to divine inspiration, yet it was the quiet intervention of the guardians that shaped the outcome. Their influence was subtle, operating in shadows rather than direct command. This indirect guidance ensured that those in power remained aligned with the broader principles of stability, morality, and balance, reinforcing the serpent's teachings across generations. The moral dimension of guardianship cannot be overstated. Custodians of knowledge understood that wisdom without ethical application could bring catastrophe. History records numerous instances where secrecy was violated or knowledge misapplied, resulting in sudden collapses, wars, or personal tragedy. Guardians were not mere archivists. They were moral arbiters, ensuring that the delicate equilibrium of influence was maintained. The serpent demanded that knowledge be wielded responsibly, rewarding patience and foresight while punishing arrogance or recklessness. Guardianship was also inherently adaptive. As societies evolved, the methods of preservation and instruction transformed. Oral traditions, encrypted texts, architectural symbolism, and even art became tools for transmitting knowledge. The serpent's teachings could survive under shifting religious, political, or cultural contexts, subtly embedding continuity amid apparent change. Custodians ensured that even when empires rose and fell, the wisdom of hidden influence remained intact, ready to guide future leaders who demonstrated the insight and restraint necessary to wield it effectively. Interestingly, guardians often operated in isolation from one another, yet their collective impact was profound. Across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, hidden networks independently maintained similar principles of knowledge preservation and ethical stewardship. The recurrence of these patterns suggests either a shared archetypal understanding or, more intriguingly, a faint thread of coordinated continuity connecting disparate civilizations. Regardless, the serpent's lessons persisted, linking cultures, guiding rulers, and influencing human destiny without ever being fully visible. The pressure on guardians was immense. Their lives were filled with tension, knowing that a single lapse could lead to the loss of knowledge or the destabilization of entire regions. Many lived under constant threat, political intrigue, religious persecution, or social upheaval could expose or eliminate them. Yet, their devotion was unwavering. They understood that the survival of wisdom itself was more important than any individual life, a principle encoded in the duality of the serpent. The reward of insight balanced against the peril of negligence. Guardians also acted as teachers. Initiates, carefully selected for aptitude, moral character, and discretion, were mentored over years or even decades. Training included observation, symbolic interpretation, strategic thinking, and ethical decision-making. These apprenticeships ensured that knowledge was not only preserved, but also transmitted responsibly. Each generation of custodians became a bridge to the next, reinforcing continuity and maintaining the invisible hand guiding human history. The legacy of these guardians is visible in subtle ways even today. Symbols, architectural patterns, and esoteric teachings embedded in cultural, religious, and political institutions are echoes of centuries of careful stewardship. The serpent's wisdom survives in the hidden rhythms of power, in strategic alliances, and in the coded knowledge passed quietly through generations. While the public may see only the surface, a library, a cathedral, a historical document, the initiated recognize the depth, the continuity, and the guiding presence of centuries-old guardianship. As we leave the quiet chambers of these custodians, we begin to see the broader picture. The serpent's influence is not limited to rulers or secret societies. It extends into ideas, institutions, and cultural frameworks that continue to shape human behavior and thought. The guardians, through centuries of vigilance and careful transmission, ensured that the invisible threads of power and knowledge remained intact, quietly influencing history even when the visible world appeared chaotic. And as we move toward the next chapter, the convergence of these hidden currents with the rise of global empires and modern institutions, a question lingers. How much of today's world, from politics to culture, is shaped by forces we cannot see, preserved by guardians who operated in shadows, and guided by wisdom older than civilization itself? The serpent watches still, coiled and patient, ensuring that knowledge endures for those who can understand its lessons. As the world moved from the medieval age into the era of modern empires, the hidden influence of the serpent did not vanish. It adapted. The methods of guidance, guardianship, and subtle power evolved, merging with bureaucracies, intelligence networks, and global trade systems. Kings and queens may have receded from absolute power, but the principles of hidden influence, secrecy, strategic knowledge, and ethical stewardship persisted, quietly shaping the political and economic landscapes of emerging nations. The serpent's coiled presence was no longer confined to temples or secret orders. It infiltrated the machinery of empires themselves. Colonial expansion offered fertile ground for hidden influence. Empires stretched across continents, governing populations previously untouched by centralized power. The subtle manipulation of alliances, trade routes, and local governance allowed hidden networks to exert influence without direct confrontation. Missionaries, advisors, and bureaucrats often acted as intermediaries for these ancient principles, ensuring that economic and political systems aligned with broader patterns of stability and control. Observers saw treaties, trade agreements, or territorial expansion, but initiates understood that these outcomes were guided by centuries of accumulated wisdom encoded in symbols, rituals, and strategic networks. The Industrial Revolution further transformed the serpent's reach. With technological advancements, knowledge spread faster, and the mechanisms of influence became more sophisticated. Banking, finance, and emerging corporations became new tools for the guardians of hidden wisdom. Just as the Templars had once used economic leverage to shape European monarchies, modern actors applied similar principles to control resources, guide decision-making, and influence global events. Subtle guidance through economic channels allowed the unseen hand to steer entire nations while preserving the illusion of independent choice. Education and institutions became another layer of influence. Elite schools, academies, and scholarly societies preserved ancient principles, embedding lessons on leadership, ethics, and strategy in curricula designed to shape the next generation of rulers, bureaucrats, and influencers. Hidden symbols, ritualized ceremonies, and coded language subtly communicated values, priorities, and warnings. Students who rose through these systems often carried forward lessons that had been preserved for centuries, applying them in politics, finance, and cultural leadership without recognizing their deep historical origins. The political revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries challenged visible power structures, yet they did not diminish the serpent's hidden currents. In fact, upheaval often provided opportunities to consolidate knowledge and influence in new ways. Revolutionary leaders, reformers, and even industrial magnates were often subtly guided by principles of strategy, moral responsibility, and timing inherited from centuries of guardianship. Success depended on understanding not only immediate circumstances, but also the hidden forces shaping societies. Those who ignored these principles frequently failed or faced unforeseen consequences, demonstrating that knowledge and subtle influence were still as vital as ever. International relations became a new stage for the serpent's influence. Diplomats, spies, and advisors operated within networks that echoed the secrecy and precision of medieval orders. Treaties, alliances, and covert operations were often influenced by principles long preserved by guardians of knowledge. Strategic patience, ethical restraint, and the careful reading of human ambition ensured that influence persisted even as visible power shifted from kings to parliaments, presidents, and global institutions. The serpent had adapted once more, thriving in the intricate web of modern governance. Wars, too, reflected the subtle hand of hidden guidance. Commanders who understood patterns, human psychology, and strategy often succeeded beyond the capabilities of their armies. Intelligence, espionage, and coded communication became the modern equivalents of rituals, symbols, and secret knowledge. Just as ancient priests had guided pharaohs or kings, modern strategists applied centuries-old lessons in observation, patience, and moral calculation. Success often depended not on brute force alone, but on the ability to anticipate, influence, and shape outcomes subtly. Even popular culture, literature, and art absorbed the serpent's influence. Writers, thinkers, and philosophers embedded allegories, symbols, and coded messages reflecting hidden wisdom. These works educated the elite and preserved principles of strategy, ethics, and influence in ways that transcended generations. Novels, plays, and essays became vessels for knowledge, disguised as entertainment or philosophy, ensuring that lessons survived even as institutions changed. The serpent thrived not only in politics and economics, but also in ideas, shaping perception, morality, and the social fabric. The Guardians' adaptability ensured the persistence of influence across global empires. While methods evolved, the core principles endured. Knowledge must be protected, influence exercised with discretion, and ethical responsibility maintained. Those who understood these currents could shape outcomes, build lasting institutions, and preserve stability even amid chaos. Those who ignored them risked collapse, chaos, or personal downfall. History, when viewed through this lens, reveals patterns that are not random, but guided by invisible hands coiled around human ambition, ready to reward insight and punish folly. Economic systems illustrate the serpent's subtle power most clearly. Financial markets, trade monopolies, and banking institutions became modern tools for influence, analogous to the Templars' medieval networks. Control over capital allowed the unseen hand to shape policies, influence rulers, and guide societal priorities. Strategic deployment of resources ensured alignment with broader principles of stability and long-term planning. Those who mastered these systems exercised influence invisible to the general population, echoing centuries-old practices that relied on discretion, foresight, and moral stewardship. The rise of global communication networks in the 20th century further expanded the serpent's domain. Information itself became a tool of influence. Media, publications, and educational systems allowed guardians to shape public perception, embed values, and preserve knowledge. Covertly, they ensured continuity of principles even as political systems modernized. The serpent's lessons on subtlety, timing, and discretion were encoded into these new instruments, demonstrating that while the world evolved, the underlying mechanics of hidden guidance remained constant. In essence, the serpent's presence in modern empires is a story of adaptation, continuity, and subtle power. Visible rulers, institutions, and global events are often only the surface of a deeper, more intricate design. Those who recognize the patterns understand that influence is rarely overt. It is cultivated patiently, maintained ethically, and applied strategically. The serpent's guardians ensured that the lessons of history were never lost, guiding humanity's development in ways that appear natural but are anything but accidental. As we leave the age of empires and turn toward contemporary global networks, corporations, and international alliances, one question emerges. How do ancient principles of hidden knowledge continue to shape our modern world? The serpent has not vanished. It has merely evolved, coiling through institutions, ideas, and systems of power, silently guiding decisions, shaping alliances, and preserving wisdom. Its watchful presence reminds us that true influence is rarely visible, yet always enduring. In the 21st century, the serpent's influence has not vanished. It has adapted, becoming more sophisticated and diffuse. Ancient principles of secrecy, guidance, and subtle control persist in modern networks, shaping corporations, governments, and global institutions. While the kings and emperors of old are replaced by CEOs, diplomats, and technocrats, the strategies of influence remain remarkably consistent. The lessons preserved by centuries of guardianship, patience, discretion, alignment with broader forces, now operate in boardrooms, international summits, and digital networks, invisible to the casual observer, yet profoundly shaping the world. Global corporations exemplify this modern manifestation. Strategic decisions, market manipulation, and mergers often reflect principles of influence and foresight that echo centuries-old wisdom. Executives who understand patterns of human behavior, geopolitical dynamics, and economic leverage can shape outcomes far beyond their visible actions. Just as medieval orders guided rulers behind the scenes, modern leaders and advisors use strategic knowledge, timing, and discretion to orchestrate events that appear spontaneous or natural but are anything but accidental. In this context, the serpent's lessons endure, teaching that influence is as much about subtlety as it is about power. Political institutions also reflect the serpent's hidden currents. Advisors, think tanks, and policy analysts operate in networks reminiscent of medieval secret orders, preserving knowledge, guiding decisions, and anticipating outcomes. Elections, legislation, and diplomatic negotiations are influenced not only by public discourse, but by unseen actors who understand historical patterns, social psychology, and the consequences of choices over time. Decisions that appear to result from chance or public pressure often carry the fingerprints of centuries of accumulated wisdom, applied discreetly to maintain stability, favor particular outcomes, or prevent chaos. Technology has amplified the serpent's reach. Digital communication, data analytics, and artificial intelligence provide unprecedented tools for shaping perception and guiding human behavior. Social media, for example, can influence public sentiment, subtly reinforcing ideas, allegiances, or cultural narratives. Algorithms operate as modern-day sigils, encoding influence into patterns that guide decision-making, often imperceptibly. The principles of subtlety, foresight, and alignment with broader patterns, once preserved through ritual and symbol, now manifest through code, networks, and digital signals, demonstrating the adaptability of ancient wisdom. Global alliances and clandestine networks continue to preserve and transmit knowledge in ways reminiscent of historical guardianship. International organizations, secretive councils, and elite forums function as modern conduits for guidance, transmitting principles of governance, strategy, and influence across borders. Their members, carefully selected for expertise, loyalty, and insight, act as custodians of collective wisdom, ensuring continuity amid rapid social, technological, and political change. The serpent's lessons endure through these networks, coiled invisibly around the levers of modern power. Finance remains one of the most potent instruments of hidden influence. Central banks, hedge funds, and multinational investment networks can shift economic realities with precision, echoing the strategic financial control wielded by orders like the Templars centuries ago. Resource allocation, credit decisions, and investment strategies operate according to principles that combine risk assessment, timing, and ethical restraint. Those who understand these networks can influence national and global outcomes, subtly guiding societies without overt visibility. The serpent's dual nature, rewarding wisdom, punishing recklessness, remains evident in financial markets, where fortunes rise and fall based on knowledge, timing, and moral calculation. Even education preserves hidden currents of influence. Elite universities, research institutions, and specialized programs train individuals not only in practical knowledge, but also in understanding networks, strategy, and ethical responsibility. Encoded lessons, mentorship, and subtle guidance ensure that emerging leaders are shaped by centuries-old principles of stewardship, foresight, and discretion. Graduates often carry forward hidden knowledge, influencing corporations, governments, and global initiatives in ways invisible to the public eye but resonant with historical patterns. The serpent's teaching persists, embedded in curricula, rituals, and mentorship that span generations. Media and culture also operate as tools of subtle influence. Television, film, literature, and journalism encode narratives that shape perception, morality, and behavior. While the public may consume these as entertainment or information, the underlying patterns reflect careful curation of ideas and principles, guiding societies over time. Initiates and informed observers recognize these patterns as modern expressions of ancient wisdom. Symbols, narratives, and rituals designed to preserve values, convey lessons, and influence human decision-making without overt visibility. Even global crises reveal the serpent's invisible hand. Natural disasters, economic shocks, or political unrest are rarely random in their societal consequences. Modern guardians of knowledge anticipate patterns, allocate resources, and guide responses in ways that preserve stability, reward foresight, and minimize chaos. Decisions made quietly behind the scenes by those trained in centuries of strategic observation and ethical restraint often determine which nations, corporations, or individuals prosper. The serpent teaches that the visible outcome is only the surface. Beneath it lies a complex web of subtle, deliberate guidance. The duality of risk and reward remains central to modern networks. Misuse of influence, whether through greed, arrogance, or ignorance, can lead to catastrophic consequences, just as it did for medieval orders or ancient civilizations. The lessons of history, preserved through centuries of guardianship, continue to warn that knowledge must be coupled with ethical responsibility, patience, and strategic thinking. The serpent's timeless principles endure. Those who understand and respect them gain influence. Those who ignore or misuse them face unforeseen consequences. Ultimately, the serpent's presence in today's world illustrates continuity across millennia. From ancient temples and secret orders to modern corporations, governments, and digital networks, the principles of subtle guidance, hidden knowledge, and moral stewardship remain remarkably consistent. Influence is rarely direct or visible. It operates in patterns, symbols, and relationships, shaping societies quietly but decisively. The serpent's wisdom is enduring, reminding us that true power lies not in overt displays, but in careful observation, strategic patience, and ethical application of knowledge. As we step back and examine the world today, it becomes clear that the hidden networks guiding modern life are the legacy of centuries of guardianship, ritual, and disciplined influence. The serpent continues to watch, coiled within institutions, culture, and human behavior, ensuring that those who understand its lessons can navigate the currents of history successfully. Its presence is subtle, yet its impact is profound, silently shaping the decisions, alliances, and outcomes that define our modern world. Even in the modern world, where technology and democracy dominate, the serpent's influence persists through rituals, ceremonies, initiations, and symbolic acts that preserve hidden wisdom and consolidate power. These rituals may appear secular or purely ceremonial, yet they encode centuries-old principles designed to transmit knowledge, test loyalty, and reinforce hierarchies. Boardroom handshakes, secretive conferences, or exclusive gatherings often mirror the initiation rites of medieval orders, carrying subtle messages about authority, allegiance, and responsibility. The serpent's lessons live on, veiled in modern forms that only the initiated fully comprehend. Elites and influential figures participate in ceremonies that reinforce cohesion, strategy, and ethical restraint. Private societies, academic fraternities, and even corporate leadership retreats employ structured activities that echo ancient practices. Symbolic gestures, oath-taking, and ritualized storytelling convey values and strategic principles, connecting participants to a lineage of hidden knowledge spanning centuries. To outsiders, these rituals may seem quaint or performative, yet for initiates, they encode vital lessons about decision-making, foresight, and the moral application of power. Symbols play a central role in these ceremonies. Rings, insignias, and regalia often carry subtle meaning, signaling rank, alignment, or achievement. Even the design of meeting spaces, arrangement of furniture, placement of artifacts, or use of lighting can reflect principles of influence, hierarchy, and observation, guiding participants' attention and behavior. Just as medieval orders used cathedrals, altars, and frescoes to encode lessons, modern elites preserve knowledge in spatial and symbolic arrangements that shape cognition, perception, and social interaction. Rituals of power also serve as mechanisms of testing and initiation. Participants are observed, evaluated, and subtly challenged, ensuring that only those capable of understanding and applying the lessons of influence advance. Ethical judgment, strategic thinking, and discretion are consistently emphasized. The serpent's duality, rewarding insight while punishing recklessness, remains central. Misinterpretation or hubris can lead to exclusion, loss of influence, or reputational damage, reinforcing the necessity of patience, moral fortitude, and alignment with broader currents of knowledge. Even public ceremonies may contain hidden layers of instruction. State inaugurations, legislative traditions, and international summits often involve symbolic acts that convey messages to the informed observer. The choice of language, gestures, or timing can signal allegiances, priorities, or strategic intentions. Just as the serpentine symbols in medieval Europe communicated guidance to initiates, modern rituals encode subtle information in plain sight. To the uninitiated, these actions seem formal or aesthetic. To the informed, they reveal patterns, strategies, and principles that guide decisions and shape alliances. The continuity of these rituals underscores the adaptability of ancient wisdom. While the form has evolved, the function remains consistent: to transmit knowledge, consolidate influence, and reinforce moral responsibility. Ceremonies teach that power is not merely possession, it is stewardship. Leaders are reminded that authority carries both opportunity and risk, that decisions ripple across societies, and that foresight, patience, and discretion are essential for survival and prosperity. The serpent's teachings are woven into every gesture, every emblem, and every carefully orchestrated moment. Education and mentorship intersect with ritual in powerful ways. Emerging leaders are often inducted into practices that blend symbolic learning with practical experience. Lessons in strategy, ethics, and observation are conveyed through ceremonial repetition, storytelling, and coded communication. These rituals foster cohesion, cultivate discipline, and reinforce continuity across generations. Participants internalize principles that have guided hidden networks for centuries, ensuring that the lessons of the serpent endure even as societal structures and technologies evolve. The influence of ritual extends into the global stage. Diplomatic gatherings, corporate summits, and international conferences often incorporate elements of ceremony designed to encode messages, reinforce hierarchy, and transmit subtle guidance. Seating arrangements, ceremonial toasts, and procedural sequences carry meaning beyond the superficial. Those trained to interpret these signals can anticipate outcomes, identify alliances, and exercise influence discreetly. Just as medieval guardians used symbols to guide rulers, modern networks use ritualized behavior to maintain continuity, transmit knowledge, and shape decisions. Moreover, rituals of power reinforce collective memory. By repeatedly performing symbolic acts, participants internalize the principles of stewardship, responsibility, and subtle influence. Knowledge is not only preserved, but embodied. The repetition of ceremonial gestures ensures that lessons are felt, remembered, and applied instinctively. Initiates carry forward not only intellectual understanding, but also an intuitive sense of timing, perception, and strategic judgment, qualities essential for navigating complex social and political landscapes. Ultimately, these rituals reveal a fundamental truth. Power is never merely visible. Influence requires structure, guidance, and moral discipline. Modern ceremonies, whether in elite societies, corporate hierarchies, or global institutions, continue the serpent's age-old mandate to preserve wisdom, transmit knowledge responsibly, and ensure that those who wield influence understand its consequences. The duality of risk and reward, discipline and discretion, remains central, just as it has been for millennia. As we move from rituals to symbols embedded in global culture and daily life, it becomes clear that the serpent's influence is omnipresent, both subtle and enduring. It thrives not only in clandestine orders or ceremonial spaces, but in ideas, institutions, and networks that shape modern civilization. The lessons of patience, discretion, and ethical stewardship continue to guide leaders, advisors, and guardians of knowledge, coiling invisibly through the fabric of society. The serpent's influence extends far beyond politics, finance, and ceremony. It lives vividly in culture, encoded in art, literature, theater, and film. Across centuries, creative works have served as vessels for hidden wisdom, subtly transmitting lessons on power, morality, and strategy. Symbols, motifs, and narratives perpetuate the teachings of the serpent, often without the audience realizing the depth of their significance. Artists, writers, and performers, knowingly or unconsciously, continue a lineage of guidance that stretches back to ancient orders and guardians of knowledge. In literature, serpentine motifs frequently appear as metaphors for wisdom, danger, or transformation. From epic poems to modern novels, the presence of the serpent signals a hidden lesson, a test of morality, or an insight into human ambition. Characters may encounter dragons, snakes, or coiled vines that, on the surface, appear as narrative devices, but, for the initiated, communicate deeper truths about strategy, patience, or the consequences of hubris. These symbolic presences act as modern-day rituals of knowledge, guiding perception and shaping thought across audiences and generations. Visual art has long mirrored this phenomenon. Paintings, sculptures, and digital media embed symbols that resonate with centuries-old principles of influence. A seemingly decorative motif, a twisting vine, a serpent concealed in a corner, or an interlocking pattern, may encode lessons about observation, vigilance, and ethical judgment. Artists, consciously or intuitively, embed these lessons, perpetuating the serpent's teachings across time. Public galleries and private collections thus become repositories of wisdom, translating ancient influence into modern forms accessible to those prepared to see. Film and theater amplify the reach of these motifs. Directors and playwrights often draw on archetypal stories of hidden knowledge, betrayal, and triumph, echoing themes preserved by guardians for centuries. The serpent manifests in narrative arcs, character development, and visual symbolism. Initiates, historians, or culturally literate viewers recognize the recurrence of hidden patterns, lessons about foresight, subtle influence, and the interplay of morality and power. Audiences may not consciously perceive these layers, yet they are guided by the embedded principles, reflecting the serpent's timeless capacity to shape thought and behavior. Music, too, encodes subtle lessons. Classical compositions, ceremonial chants, and modern pieces often follow structured patterns reminiscent of ritualistic rhythm. Initiates can interpret these sequences as guidance, aligning emotional states with reflection, strategy, or foresight. Even popular music and contemporary soundtracks carry echoes of structured influence, connecting audiences to collective memory, archetypal symbolism, and enduring narratives that convey lessons on human ambition, responsibility, and consequence. Cultural rituals, festivals, and societal ceremonies perpetuate similar principles. Public displays of tradition, heritage, and celebration often encode hidden instruction for those trained to interpret them. The arrangement of processions, choreography of movements, and design of costumes are rarely random. They preserve continuity, reinforce hierarchy, and maintain subtle influence across generations. In this sense, the serpent's presence is woven into the fabric of collective culture, guiding societies in ways that appear natural but are deeply intentional. Education and storytelling reinforce cultural transmission of hidden wisdom. Folk tales, myths, and allegories carry layered meaning, teaching principles of patience, ethical behavior, and strategic thinking. Children's stories, epic sagas, and contemporary fiction alike preserve subtle instruction, much like the manuscripts, symbols, and rituals of guardians from centuries past. The serpent's lessons permeate consciousness long before formal study, shaping morality, perception, and intuition. Culture becomes a silent teacher, encoding principles of influence that guide generations. Globalization has intensified the serpent's cultural reach. Ideas, art, and narratives travel rapidly, preserving continuity across nations and civilizations. Modern media, digital archives, and global communications allow symbols and lessons to be transmitted instantaneously, extending the scope of hidden influence. Whereas medieval guardians relied on localized networks, today's cultural currents ensure that knowledge, patterns, and wisdom are embedded in a shared human experience, accessible to those capable of discerning the subtle guidance embedded within. The duality of influence and risk continues in cultural transmission. Misinterpretation or misuse of symbolic knowledge can lead to ethical lapses, societal unrest, or moral decay. Artists, writers, and cultural leaders act as stewards of tradition, preserving integrity while adapting to new mediums. In this way, culture itself becomes a modern guardian, carrying forward lessons encoded in symbolism, narrative, and ritual, ensuring that wisdom endures and remains relevant to contemporary audiences. Ultimately, the serpent in culture demonstrates the subtle but pervasive nature of hidden influence. Its presence is everywhere, in the stories we read, the films we watch, the art we admire, and the ceremonies we observe, reminding us that wisdom, when preserved and transmitted skillfully, can guide societies across centuries. Just as ancient orders used symbols, rituals, and mentorship to shape human behavior, modern culture continues this tradition, embedding ethical, strategic, and philosophical principles into the collective consciousness. As we move from cultural manifestations to the psychology of hidden influence, one insight becomes clear: the serpent does not rely solely on secrecy. Its enduring power comes from integration, adaptation, and subtle guidance, whether in art, education, or public ritual. It thrives in plain sight, coiling through human imagination, perception, and behavior, ensuring that its lessons on foresight, morality, and strategic influence remain accessible to those willing to see, understand, and act upon them. The serpent's power extends beyond symbols, rituals, and culture. It reaches directly into the human mind. From ancient temples to modern corporations, the principles of hidden influence manipulate perception, guide decision-making, and shape behavior. Guardians of knowledge understood that control over thought was as vital as control over territory or resources. By influencing how people perceive reality, interpret events, and respond to authority, the serpent ensured that its lessons endured and that society functioned in alignment with broader, often unseen, currents of wisdom. At the heart of this psychological influence is subtlety. Direct control is fragile. Humans resist overt manipulation. The serpent's teachings emphasize indirect guidance, shaping choices without forcing them. Leaders are guided through suggestion, pattern recognition, and exposure to recurring principles. Symbols, rituals, and narratives all act as tools to mold perception, embedding values, expectations, and strategic priorities. Individuals may feel as though they act independently, yet their decisions often follow the contours carved by centuries of hidden wisdom. Education, mentorship, and early exposure play crucial roles. Initiates, apprentices, and even ordinary citizens absorb principles through repeated exposure to structured patterns, allegories, and behavioral cues. Children's stories, cultural rituals, and structured learning environments subtly reinforce ideas of patience, ethical responsibility, and strategic foresight. These lessons, when repeated over years, shape cognitive frameworks, guiding thought processes and decision-making long before conscious awareness develops. The serpent's wisdom becomes embedded in perception itself. Fear, desire, and curiosity are leveraged as psychological tools. Guardians of knowledge recognize that human behavior is largely motivated by emotion. Stories of reward and punishment, visible consequences of ethical or reckless choices, and symbolic representations of risk all train individuals to interpret outcomes and align behavior with desired principles. By engaging emotion alongside reason, the serpent ensures that its lessons are not merely intellectual, but deeply internalized, influencing instinct, intuition, and judgment. The use of narrative is particularly powerful. Humans are naturally drawn to stories. They structure memory, evoke empathy, and encode complex lessons. The serpent's guardians employed allegory, myth, and historical example to transmit principles of strategy, ethics, and foresight. From ancient epics to modern literature, these narratives provide a framework for understanding consequences, recognizing patterns, and interpreting human ambition. The story becomes both teacher and guide, shaping psychological landscapes without overt instruction. Social dynamics amplify psychological influence. Initiates and participants in rituals, organizations, or cultural networks learn to interpret hierarchy, alliances, and subtle behavioral cues. Observing who is rewarded, who is excluded, and which actions carry consequences reinforces understanding of power structures and ethical priorities. Peer influence, combined with mentorship, creates a feedback loop, embedding the serpent's lessons in both cognition and behavior. Individuals internalize not only what is effective, but also what is morally sanctioned or strategically sound. The concept of delayed consequence is central to psychological influence. Guardians recognize that immediate reward or punishment limits learning. By structuring outcomes across time, through reputation, historical precedent, or symbolic lessons, behavior is shaped more profoundly. Modern examples include strategic corporate planning, diplomatic negotiation, and even social media influence, where delayed feedback reinforces alignment with desired norms. The serpent teaches that foresight, patience, and reflection are essential. Those who act impulsively risk misalignment with enduring principles. Cognitive framing and perception management are also tools of hidden influence. Information is structured, presented, and contextualized to guide interpretation. Symbols, rituals, and narrative frameworks shape how individuals perceive events, risks, and opportunities. Decisions are rarely made in a vacuum. They occur within a carefully curated mental landscape. The serpent's lessons are thus encoded in perception itself. By shaping how humans see the world, it subtly guides choices, ethical reasoning, and strategic thinking. Psychological influence operates on both individual and collective levels. Leaders' decisions shape societies, economies, and institutions. Subtle guidance, whether through mentorship, ritual, or symbolic communication, ensures that influential figures act in alignment with enduring principles. At the collective level, culture, media, and education shape public perception, reinforcing social cohesion, ethical norms, and strategic understanding. The serpent's influence is, therefore, both personal and systemic, coiling invisibly through minds, communities, and nations. The interplay of awareness and subconscious influence is critical. Those initiated into the serpent's wisdom consciously recognize the principles at work, while the uninitiated remain subtly guided by them. This duality ensures continuity. Knowledge is transmitted both explicitly to those capable of understanding it deeply, and implicitly to society at large, shaping behavior, expectations, and moral reasoning. The serpent's coiled presence is simultaneously visible to the prepared and invisible to the casual observer, allowing influence to persist across generations. Ultimately, psychological influence demonstrates the depth of the serpent's reach. Power is not only exercised through visible authority, symbols, or wealth. It is rooted in perception, cognition, and behavior. Guardians of knowledge understood that shaping minds, guiding thought, and influencing decisions were the most enduring forms of control. By embedding lessons in stories, rituals, culture, and mentorship, the serpent ensures that wisdom persists, shaping history quietly yet decisively. As we move from the individual and collective psyche to the realm of secret alliances and modern networks, one truth emerges. The serpent's influence is never merely symbolic or ceremonial. It is practical, deeply psychological, and profoundly effective. By understanding human nature and leveraging subtle patterns, hidden forces have guided decisions, forged alliances, and shaped societies for millennia. And even today, those who recognize these principles wield influence in ways that remain invisible to most, yet profoundly shape the course of history. The serpent's influence reaches its most potent expression when individuals, organizations, and networks converge in secret. Alliances in the shadows, often invisible to the public eye, allow hidden forces to amplify their power, exchange knowledge, and coordinate strategic outcomes. These partnerships, whether between corporations, governments, or clandestine societies, operate according to centuries-old principles of discretion, mutual benefit, and ethical stewardship. The serpent teaches that while isolated wisdom can preserve knowledge, coordinated action magnifies influence exponentially. Throughout history, these hidden alliances have shaped events that appear random or inevitable to outsiders. Monarchs were subtly guided by coalitions of advisors, bankers, and scholars. Strategic marriages, trade agreements, and secret treaties often masked deeper patterns of influence, connecting otherwise independent actors into cohesive networks. These coalitions maintained balance, ensured continuity of knowledge, and reinforced ethical constraints, demonstrating that true power is exercised less through visibility than through coordinated subtlety. Modern incarnations of these alliances operate across borders and institutions. Think tanks, international councils, corporate boards, and elite forums form networks of influence, often deliberately opaque. Meetings, correspondence, and strategic consultations function as channels for hidden guidance. Participants, chosen for expertise, loyalty, and ethical reliability, act as custodians of collective knowledge, extending the principles of ancient guardianship into contemporary global affairs. The Serpent's teachings, discretion, foresight, and moral responsibility, remain central to these modern networks. Trust and secrecy are the foundation of shadow alliances. Information is shared selectively, and actions are coordinated with precision. Breach of trust can have catastrophic consequences, not only for individuals, but for entire systems of influence. Throughout history, exposure of hidden coalitions has led to collapse, chaos, or warfare. Guardians of knowledge understood that alliances were fragile structures that required careful nurturing, ethical consistency, and a shared understanding of long-term strategic goals. The Serpent's wisdom emphasizes that patience and vigilance are the keys to sustaining such networks. Strategic alignment within these alliances is often reinforced through rituals, symbols, and shared narratives. Members communicate intentions, priorities, and ethical guidelines through subtle cues, art, literature, ceremony, or coded language. Even seemingly mundane interactions, such as private dinners, correspondence, or collaborative projects, serve as vessels for transmitting values, testing loyalty, and coordinating strategy. The Serpent teaches that visible action is only part of influence. True guidance occurs in unseen channels, where principles are transmitted, observed, and internalized. Economic and political leverage is frequently coordinated within shadow alliances. By pooling resources, sharing intelligence, or synchronizing decision-making, these networks influence outcomes that appear spontaneous to the public. Historical examples abound. Trade monopolies, dynastic marriages, secret treaties, and intelligence networks all demonstrate the magnified impact of coordinated action. In the modern era, multinational corporations, financial institutions, and global organizations continue this tradition, applying collective wisdom to shape markets, policies, and societal priorities with precision and discretion. Psychological influence is amplified within these alliances. Members learn to read patterns, anticipate behavior, and guide decision-making in alignment with broader principles. Strategic patience, foresight, and ethical consideration are constantly reinforced, both individually and collectively. By combining knowledge with coordinated action, shadow alliances magnify the Serpent's influence, ensuring that decisions are not only effective but ethically and strategically sound. Misalignment or hubris can jeopardize outcomes, demonstrating that cohesion, trust, and discipline are critical to sustaining hidden power. These networks are not purely hierarchical. While leadership exists, influence often flows laterally, allowing ideas, strategies, and moral guidance to circulate freely among capable members. This decentralized approach increases resilience. If one node fails, others maintain continuity, preserving the collective wisdom and strategic capacity. Guardians of knowledge recognized this structure centuries ago, understanding that survival of hidden influence depended on adaptability, redundancy, and the careful cultivation of competent allies. Historical secrecy is echoed in modern practices of encryption, secure communication, and confidential consultation. Just as ancient custodians hid manuscripts or encoded symbols, contemporary alliances rely on secure channels to protect information, coordinate strategy, and transmit ethical principles. The Serpent's duality, rewarding wisdom while punishing recklessness, is encoded in these practices. Only those capable of discretion, strategic thinking, and ethical application are entrusted with critical knowledge. Mistakes can be catastrophic, reinforcing the importance of training, observation, and patience. Cultural reinforcement also sustains these shadow alliances. Shared rituals, symbols, and narratives create cohesion, ensuring that members internalize the values, priorities, and strategic principles of the network. Initiation, mentorship, and ceremonial practice reinforce ethical and strategic frameworks, aligning behavior and thought with the broader goals of the alliance. The Serpent's teachings endure not only through instruction, but through embodied experience, embedding wisdom into perception, judgment, and instinct. Shadow alliances operate on multiple scales simultaneously. Small, localized networks influence specific outcomes, while global coalitions shape entire regions, markets, or political spheres. These layers interact, creating a complex lattice of influence that is resilient, adaptive, and far-reaching. Decisions made in one corner of the network can ripple across the system, producing outcomes that appear spontaneous or inevitable. The Serpent's presence is evident in the subtle coordination of these effects, demonstrating the enduring power of ancient principles applied through modern structures. Ultimately, alliances in the shadows reveal the essence of the Serpent's enduring wisdom. Power is most effective when it is coordinated, discreet, and ethically guided. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Influence requires strategic collaboration, mutual trust, and alignment with enduring principles. From ancient courts to modern global institutions, these hidden networks magnify the impact of custodianship, ensuring that decisions, strategies, and cultural currents remain coherent and sustainable over centuries. As we transition from the study of alliances to the mechanics of strategy itself, one truth emerges. The Serpent's influence is most formidable when it operates collectively. Through coordinated action, shared wisdom, and ethical stewardship, hidden alliances magnify subtle power, shaping outcomes that guide societies, economies, and civilizations. These networks are the living legacy of guardianship, ensuring that the Serpent's lessons persist and continue to shape history in ways most can neither see nor comprehend. Symbols are the language of the unseen. For centuries, the Serpent has encoded wisdom, strategy, and moral guidance into shapes, images, and signs. These symbols operate quietly, shaping perception, reinforcing hierarchy, and preserving knowledge across generations. From ancient temples to modern institutions, serpentine imagery, coiled patterns, twisting vines, and serpents themselves communicates principles that words often cannot convey. Symbols are durable, adaptable, and almost imperceptible to those not trained to see, making them the ideal medium for hidden influence. Architecture itself often serves as a canvas for these symbols. Palaces, governmental buildings, and private estates embed serpentine motifs in staircases, arches, and facades. The placement of rooms, corridors, and halls can subtly guide behavior, focus attention, and establish hierarchy. Just as medieval cathedrals encoded spiritual and moral lessons through proportions, light, and iconography, modern structures transmit principles of influence, discretion, and foresight. Those trained in interpretation can read patterns, anticipating priorities, values, and strategic intentions embedded in stone, wood, or metal. Visual art continues this tradition. Paintings, sculptures, and installations often conceal layers of meaning accessible only to the initiated. A coiled figure in a corner, a twisting motif in a tapestry, or an interwoven pattern in a mural can encode warnings, guidance, or lessons in leadership and ethics. artists, consciously or unconsciously, preserve centuries of accumulated wisdom, transmitting subtle guidance through aesthetics. To the general public, these are decorative or narrative. To the informed, they are vessels of instruction, shaping perception and reinforcing hidden networks of knowledge. Even mathematics and geometry serve as symbolic languages. Sacred proportions, spirals, and fractal patterns appear in both historical monuments and contemporary designs. These forms carry encoded lessons about balance, order, and strategy. Just as ancient orders used geometry to represent moral and ethical principles, modern architects, designers, and strategists embed similar patterns to convey hierarchy, foresight, and relational dynamics. Symbols, when combined with spatial awareness, guide behavior, influence cognition, and preserve knowledge subtly but powerfully. Written language and coded texts further amplify symbolic influence. Secret manuscripts, encrypted communications, and emblematic literature preserve centuries of strategy, ethics, and history. Initiates and scholars trained in interpretation can extract principles and guidance from seemingly obscure or decorative elements. In this sense, symbols act as both memory and teacher, ensuring continuity even when institutions, rulers, or societies change. The serpent's lessons survive because they are encoded in forms that transcend time, medium, and culture. Religious and spiritual iconography is another critical domain. Serpents, dragons, and coiled creatures frequently appear in sacred art, myth, and ritual. While often interpreted as representations of evil or temptation in popular narratives, these figures historically symbolize wisdom, transformation, and strategic insight. Temples, altars, and ceremonial objects embed principles of observation, foresight, and moral discernment. Initiates trained in interpretation internalize these lessons, while the uninitiated perceive only beauty, story, or superstition. The serpent thrives in this dual perception, guiding subtly while remaining concealed. Modern symbols have evolved but retain the same function. Corporate logos, ceremonial insignias, flags, and digital icons encode identity, hierarchy, and strategic messaging. Symbols shape perception, convey authority, and reinforce cohesion within networks. Those aware of historical lineage and hidden principles can interpret these designs as guidance, anticipating behavior, alliances, and priorities. In essence, the serpent's language has adapted to modern media, ensuring its influence persists even in contemporary contexts. Cultural rituals often integrate symbolic language. Festivals, processions, and public ceremonies carry layers of meaning beyond the surface. Movement, color, timing, and placement convey strategic and ethical lessons to participants and observers alike. Just as ancient guardians used ritual to transmit wisdom, modern societies embed principles of coordination, hierarchy, and foresight within visible cultural practices. Symbols thus operate in concert with behavior, reinforcing psychological conditioning, ethical standards, and strategic alignment. The endurance of symbols lies in their adaptability. While language, technology, and institutions evolve, patterns, metaphors, and motifs remain resilient. A coiled serpent carved in stone centuries ago may inspire a logo, architectural design, or literary motif today. The message persists. Knowledge, ethical responsibility, and strategic foresight are timeless. Symbols act as memory encoded into culture, architecture, art, and daily life, connecting past, present, and future in an unbroken chain of hidden guidance. Ultimately, the serpent's symbols demonstrate the power of subtlety. True influence often resides not in overt control, but in the patterns we see, interpret, and internalize. Guardians of knowledge understood that visual and structural language could shape cognition, behavior, and morality across generations. By embedding lessons in symbols, whether in temples, manuscripts, or digital spaces, the serpent ensures that its wisdom endures, coiling invisibly through time and space, guiding those who recognize it while remaining hidden from the casual observer. As we move from symbolic influence to strategic application in leadership and governance, one truth emerges. The serpent's lessons are encoded everywhere, awaiting recognition by those perceptive enough to understand. Power, foresight, and ethical influence are transmitted not only through words or actions, but through forms, patterns, and subtle visual language that have endured for millennia. The coiled presence of wisdom continues to shape society, guiding decisions, behavior, and history itself. Throughout history, the serpent's wisdom has been preserved by dedicated individuals and secretive groups whose purpose transcends ordinary ambition. These guardians, often hidden from the public eye, serve as custodians of knowledge, strategy, and ethical guidance. Their mission is not to wield power for its own sake, but to ensure that wisdom survives, is transmitted responsibly, and is applied judiciously. From monastic scholars to modern think tanks, these guardians have acted as the invisible scaffolding of civilization, safeguarding principles that guide rulers, societies, and institutions. In ancient times, temples, monasteries, and academies were more than centers of worship or study. They were repositories of hidden knowledge. Sacred texts, coded manuscripts, and ritual practices preserved lessons in ethics, strategy, and foresight. Initiates learned not only the practical applications of influence, but also the moral obligations of power. Guardians maintained strict discipline, ensuring that knowledge was shared selectively and with great responsibility. Those who failed to demonstrate prudence, discretion, or ethical understanding were often denied access, reinforcing the duality of reward and consequence that lies at the heart of the serpent's teachings. As history progressed, these custodians adapted. Medieval orders, secret societies, and scholarly networks continued the work of preserving and transmitting wisdom, often in parallel with public institutions. The Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, and other clandestine organizations maintained libraries, ritual practices, and mentorship systems designed to encode and convey strategic principles. Guardians acted as intermediaries between knowledge and leadership, shaping decisions subtly while remaining largely invisible. Their influence often determined the outcomes of political conflicts, territorial expansions, and even economic revolutions. In the modern era, guardians of knowledge operate through think tanks, academic institutions, research councils, and advisory networks. While the settings have changed, the principles remain constant. Ethical stewardship, careful mentorship, and the selective transmission of information. Modern guardians train leaders, advise governments, and influence organizational strategy, applying lessons preserved for centuries. They understand that knowledge alone is insufficient. Wisdom must be applied with discretion, foresight, and moral responsibility. Guardians also serve as interpreters of symbols, rituals, and patterns. Ancient teachings encoded in architecture, art, literature, and culture are decoded by these custodians, who translate them into practical guidance for contemporary decision-making. Their expertise allows societies to access centuries of accumulated wisdom without exposing the mechanisms of influence to public scrutiny. Through mentorship, research, and advisory roles, they ensure that the serpent's lessons continue to shape leadership, policy, and strategic action across generations. The moral dimension is central to guardianship. Knowledge is not neutral. It carries the potential for great good or catastrophic harm. Guardians are trained to evaluate consequences, balance ambition with ethics, and guide leaders toward responsible application of influence. Historical examples abound. Advisors who tempered the excesses of rulers, scholars who preserved critical knowledge through political upheavals, and secret societies that intervened subtly to prevent chaos. In each case, the serpent's duality, rewarding foresight, punishing recklessness, was evident, emphasizing that stewardship is inseparable from ethical responsibility. Secrecy remains a defining characteristic. Guardians operate in parallel with visible structures, influencing outcomes without drawing attention. This discretion ensures that knowledge is preserved without interference or corruption. Initiates are carefully selected for their capacity to understand, apply, and protect wisdom. Trust is the foundation of these networks, and breaches can have dire consequences. The Serpent's guidance teaches that influence is not merely about control, but about responsibility, patience, and alignment with broader currents of understanding. Mentorship and education are crucial mechanisms for transmitting knowledge. Guardians do not merely provide information. They cultivate intuition, judgment, and ethical awareness. Through carefully structured instruction, ritual, and observation, they ensure that wisdom is internalized, not simply memorized. Apprentices learn to recognize patterns, anticipate consequences, and apply strategic thinking in complex situations. The process is both practical and transformative, producing individuals capable of operating effectively within the hidden structures that guide society. These custodians often act as the connective tissue between generations. They bridge the past and present, ensuring continuity of insight even amid social, technological, and political change. Their work allows principles preserved for millennia to remain relevant in contemporary contexts. Just as ancient monks maintained libraries and copied manuscripts to ensure survival of knowledge, modern guardians use research, analysis, and mentorship to preserve insight, guiding institutions and leaders in alignment with enduring wisdom. Ultimately, the Serpent's guardians illustrate the enduring power of hidden guidance. Their role is not to dominate, but to preserve, interpret, and transmit. They ensure that influence remains ethical, strategic, and responsible, applying lessons across centuries to shape leaders, societies, and civilizations. Through their stewardship, the Serpent's wisdom continues to coil invisibly through history, culture, and human behavior, ensuring that knowledge is never lost and that those capable of understanding it can wield it wisely. As we transition from the individuals who safeguard knowledge to the mechanisms by which power is exercised and maintained, one insight becomes clear. Guardians are the silent architects of influence. They preserve lessons, interpret symbols, and cultivate ethical application, ensuring that the Serpent's guidance continues to shape the course of history with precision, subtlety, and foresight. The Serpent's lessons are not meant to linger in theory. They're designed to move, to act, and to shape the world. Power, when properly guided, is dynamic, flowing through individuals, institutions, and networks with subtle precision. Guardians of knowledge ensure that wisdom is translated into action, not wasted in abstraction. Strategy, timing, and ethical foresight converge to create outcomes that may appear spontaneous to outsiders, yet are the result of centuries of hidden instruction, observation, and planning. Throughout history, rulers, advisors, and leaders have applied these principles to navigate uncertainty. Battles were won not solely by strength, but by the calculated application of foresight, intelligence, and psychological insight. Trade, diplomacy, and governance were influenced by those who understood the invisible currents of power. The serpent's influence is evident in decisions that balanced immediate necessity with long-term consequence, demonstrating the enduring interplay between knowledge, action, and ethical stewardship. Modern power operates similarly, albeit in more complex and interconnected systems. Corporate decisions, governmental policies, and international alliances are guided by principles that echo those of ancient custodians. Strategic planning, negotiation, and coalition building all require a nuanced understanding of human behavior, timing, and consequence. Those trained in the serpent's wisdom recognize that influence is most effective when applied subtly, when the appearance of spontaneity masks the careful orchestration of insight and foresight. The movement of power is often invisible. Policies, initiatives, and corporate strategies ripple outward in ways that are imperceptible at first glance. Small interventions can set in motion vast consequences, much like a stone dropped into still water. Guardians and leaders trained in these principles learn to anticipate reactions, shape perceptions, and align outcomes with ethical and strategic objectives. The serpent teaches that influence is not brute force. It is guidance, coordination, and timing. Psychological insight remains a critical tool. Understanding motives, desires, and fears allows leaders to align action with perception. By framing choices, structuring information, and controlling the flow of influence, those applying hidden wisdom guide behavior without overt control. Decisions appear natural, inevitable, or self-directed, yet they follow the contours shaped by knowledge, ethics, and foresight. The serpent's influence is most potent where it is least visible, shaping outcomes without the need for coercion. Economic and political currents are prime examples of power in motion. Market trends, regulatory shifts, and international policies are guided by strategic action informed by insight into human behavior, alliances, and long-term consequence. Subtle coordination across networks ensures that interventions align with ethical principles, strategic goals, and historical precedent. The interplay of these forces demonstrates the continuity of hidden guidance, proving that influence persists even as society evolves. Cultural influence is also part of power in motion. Media, art, and narrative can shape thought, perception, and morality on a mass scale. Guardians understand that controlling ideas, symbols, and stories is as critical as controlling resources or institutions. Through subtle guidance embedded in culture, societies are oriented toward ethical reflection, foresight, and strategic thinking. The serpent's lessons, therefore, are not confined to politics or commerce. They flow through the very consciousness of civilization, shaping behavior and decisions across generations. Timing is essential. Effective power is synchronized with the currents of opportunity, context, and perception. Actions taken too early may be ineffective, too late, and the moment is lost. Guardians of knowledge teach that patience, observation, and preparation are as important as action itself. Strategic motion requires careful calibration, balancing risk with reward, insight with discretion, and ambition with ethical responsibility. The serpent embodies this principle, teaching that wisdom is not static. It is a dynamic force applied with precision. Alliances amplify movement. Coordinated networks of influence extend the reach and effectiveness of strategic action. By combining resources, intelligence, and insight, shadow alliances, guardians, and informed leaders create a flow of power that moves silently yet decisively. Historical events, from military campaigns to diplomatic negotiations, demonstrate the amplification of hidden wisdom through collaborative action. Modern networks of influence continue this tradition, coordinating strategies across institutions, nations, and markets to produce outcomes that appear natural but are meticulously guided. Ultimately, power in motion is the living expression of the serpent's lessons. Knowledge, ethics, foresight, and subtle coordination converge to shape the world, often unseen. Leaders, guardians, and participants in hidden networks translate wisdom into action, ensuring that influence is effective, sustainable, and morally aligned. The serpent's teachings are not theoretical. They're kinetic, guiding the flow of decisions, alliances, and events through time with invisible precision. As we transition from the mechanics of action to the consequences of influence, one insight becomes clear. The serpent's wisdom only reaches its full potential when applied with patience, coordination, and ethical foresight. Power is alive, dynamic, and continuous, coiling invisibly through history, shaping outcomes and guiding civilization toward both stability and insight. The next question is unavoidable. When wisdom is applied so subtly, what are the unseen consequences, and who bears the weight of influence? Hidden power carries weight, and every ripple has consequences. The serpent's influence, subtle yet pervasive, shapes societies, leaders, and institutions, but it is not without cost. Decisions guided by hidden wisdom can elevate civilizations, avert disasters, and cultivate ethical governance. Yet the same lessons, when misapplied or misunderstood, can create chaos, oppression, or moral decay. Guardians of knowledge understood that influence is a double-edged sword. It can be a force for preservation or destruction, depending on the judgment of those who wield it. History is strewn with examples. Monarchs guided by loyal advisors often achieved lasting stability. Yet those who misread counsel or ignored ethical guidance fell prey to hubris, corruption, or betrayal. Wars, revolutions, and economic collapses frequently reveal the unseen hand of influence, whether it was applied effectively or neglected entirely. The serpent's lessons demand foresight, patience, and moral responsibility. Deviation from these principles carries consequences not only for leaders, but for entire populations. At the societal level, influence shapes norms, culture, and perception. When applied ethically, it fosters cohesion, progress, and resilience. Societies guided by wisdom often cultivate arts, science, and governance that endure through centuries. Conversely, manipulation without ethical oversight produces distrust, inequality, and instability. The hidden currents of power are impartial. They amplify skill, judgment, and foresight, but also magnify error, recklessness, and short-sightedness. The serpent rewards prudence and punishes neglect. Psychological consequences are equally profound. Leaders and those involved in hidden networks internalize responsibility, ethical reflection, and strategic thinking. Yet the burden can be isolating. Awareness of unseen patterns, ethical implications, and potential outcomes creates a weight few can bear. Mistakes or lapses in judgment carry not just practical consequences but moral ones, reinforcing the dual nature of influence as both gift and responsibility. The serpent's lessons are therefore as much about character as strategy. Economic and political spheres demonstrate the tangible impact of influence. Coordinated networks, strategic alliances, and subtle guidance can generate prosperity, innovation, and stability. Conversely, when principles are misinterpreted, ignored, or corrupted, the results are devastating. Markets collapse, governments fail, and alliances fracture. Guardians of knowledge recognize that even small errors can produce cascading effects, demonstrating the fragility and potency of hidden influence. The serpent teaches humility, foresight, and vigilance. Cultural and ethical consequences are intertwined. Symbolism, narrative, and ritual influence thought and behavior, shaping society's collective conscience. When misaligned with ethical principles, Cultural influence can reinforce prejudice, manipulation, or moral decay. Conversely, it can inspire reflection, wisdom, and social cohesion when guided responsibly. The serpent's presence in culture is a reminder that subtle influence carries long-term consequences, shaping perception, ethics, and societal evolution over centuries. Conflict and resolution often reflect the balance of hidden influence. Wars, rebellions, and revolutions can be traced to both the application and neglect of strategic wisdom. Leaders who fail to heed counsel, misread alliances, or ignore historical patterns often precipitate chaos. Conversely, those who integrate foresight, ethical responsibility, and coordinated action achieve stability, prosperity, and enduring influence. The serpent's lessons underscore that power is inseparable from consequence. Every decision, visible or hidden, has a ripple effect that extends beyond immediate perception. Ethical dilemmas are inherent in hidden influence. The duality of guiding without coercing, shaping outcomes without exposing methods, requires judgment, restraint, and moral clarity. Guardians and leaders must balance ambition with responsibility, foresight with humility, and action with discretion. Misalignment between intent and outcome can lead to ethical compromise, unintended harm, or systemic instability. The serpent's wisdom emphasizes that influence is not neutral. It is morally charged, and the consequences of misapplication are profound. Even modern society is shaped by these invisible currents. Policies, financial systems, media, and cultural narratives are influenced by hidden networks that echo centuries-old principles. The outcomes, whether positive or destructive, often appear natural or inevitable. History teaches that those unaware of these currents are vulnerable to misperception, manipulation, or unintended consequences. The serpent's influence continues to shape human civilization, silently coiling through decision-making, perception, and societal evolution. Ultimately, understanding the consequences of influence is essential to mastering it. The serpent's lessons are not merely strategic. They are deeply ethical, psychological, and systemic. They remind us that power is a responsibility, foresight is a duty, and wisdom is preserved not for its own sake, but for the outcomes it produces. Every ripple, every subtle guidance, every hidden lesson carries consequences that can endure for centuries. To wield influence without understanding these consequences is to invite chaos. To apply it wisely is to shape history itself. As we prepare to conclude our journey through hidden power, one truth emerges. The serpent's influence is enduring precisely because it balances knowledge, action, and consequence. Wisdom is neither theoretical nor abstract. It moves through individuals, networks, and societies, shaping the present while preserving lessons from the past. The next section will explore the culmination of this journey, the emotional and philosophical revelation of the serpent's enduring legacy, and what it means for how we understand history itself. As we approach the culmination of this hidden journey, the serpent's legacy becomes undeniable. Its influence stretches across millennia, weaving through human history like an invisible thread. From ancient temples to modern boardrooms, from sacred texts to coded symbols in art, the serpent has shaped thought, behavior, and destiny. Its legacy is not merely one of power or control. It is a testament to wisdom, foresight, and the enduring interplay between knowledge and consequence. The first mark of the serpent's legacy is continuity. Civilizations rise and fall, rulers succeed and fail, yet the principles preserved by guardians and transmitted through symbols, alliances, and mentorship endure. Lessons of patience, strategic thinking, ethical foresight, and subtle influence survive upheavals, wars, and revolutions. Even when visible structures crumble, the hidden currents of knowledge continue to guide, shaping society in ways both profound and subtle. The serpent teaches that true wisdom transcends temporality. It is a force that persists beyond fleeting institutions and ephemeral power. Ethical guidance forms the core of this legacy. The serpent does not reward ambition alone. It rewards foresight, moral reflection, and disciplined application of knowledge. Guardians throughout history have reminded leaders that influence carries responsibility and that each action ripples through generations. This legacy of accountability ensures that power is not merely inherited or seized, but cultivated with awareness and ethical consideration. Civilizations that respected these principles flourished. Those that ignore them often collapsed under the weight of hubris or short-sightedness. Cultural resonance is another facet of the serpent's influence. Its symbols, stories, and rituals permeate art, literature, and collective consciousness. Whether through the coiled patterns in architecture, allegorical tales, or sacred motifs, the serpent's teachings embed themselves in the very fabric of human perception. Those trained to interpret them see layers of meaning, moral guidance, and strategic insight that others overlook. Its legacy is thus simultaneously hidden and visible, shaping understanding subtly, while remaining largely imperceptible to casual observers. The psychological impact of this legacy is profound. Individuals who recognize the serpent's principles gain foresight, ethical clarity, and strategic acumen. They learn to anticipate consequences, navigate complex social dynamics, and balance ambition with responsibility. Conversely, those unaware of these currents may act recklessly, missing opportunities or falling prey to manipulation. The serpent's legacy demonstrates that knowledge is transformative, shaping not only decisions but perception, judgment, and character. In governance, the legacy manifests through the invisible hand of influence. Leaders guided by ethical wisdom achieve stability, prosperity, and innovation. Shadow alliances, mentorship networks, and symbolic communication continue to shape decisions in ways often invisible to the public eye. Modern institutions, while outwardly transparent, often operate within frameworks established by centuries of accumulated knowledge, reflecting principles cultivated by guardians of the serpent's teachings. The influence is subtle yet profound, demonstrating that legacy is not measured solely by visibility, but by effectiveness over time. The historical record itself bears witness to this legacy. Moments of decisive leadership, cultural flourishing, and societal resilience often trace back to unseen guidance. Conversely, collapses, revolutions, and catastrophic decisions reveal the absence of wisdom or the misapplication of hidden principles. The serpent's duality, rewarding prudence, punishing recklessness, is etched into history, demonstrating that influence is inseparable from consequence, and that legacy is shaped not just by actions, but by the ethical and strategic frameworks that underpin them. Modern relevance is undeniable. Even in an age dominated by technology, globalization, and rapid communication, the serpent's principles remain applicable. Ethical decision-making, foresight, mentorship, and subtle coordination continue to shape outcomes in politics, business, and culture. Symbols evolve, alliances adapt, and strategies modernize, yet the underlying lessons, coiled and enduring, persist. The serpent's legacy is a reminder that history is not merely a record of events, but a living network of influence, ethics, and knowledge that continues to guide humanity. Emotionally, the legacy evokes awe, reflection, and responsibility. It reminds us that every decision, no matter how small, carries the potential to ripple through time. The serpent teaches humility, patience, and discernment, emphasizing that wisdom is cultivated through observation, ethical reflection, and careful application of knowledge. To recognize its legacy is to acknowledge both the power and the responsibility inherent in understanding hidden currents of influence. Finally, the serpent's legacy challenges perception. It invites us to see history not as a sequence of random events, but as a tapestry woven by knowledge, foresight, and ethical guidance. It asks difficult questions. Who truly shapes outcomes? How much of what we consider chance is guided by hidden hands? And, most importantly, what role might each of us play in perpetuating, applying, or misinterpreting this wisdom? The serpent's presence lingers in the subtle choices, symbolic cues, and strategic actions that define civilizations, leaving us with a mixture of wonder, reflection, and profound respect. As we prepare for the final section, one truth emerges clearly. The serpent's influence is not confined to the past. Its lessons, encoded in wisdom, ethics, and strategy, continue to shape human thought and action. The final revelation lies not only in understanding the past, but in recognizing the responsibility we inherit as participants in the ongoing flow of hidden influence. The next section will explore this revelation, providing an emotional and philosophical conclusion that leaves viewers reflecting on history, human nature, and the unseen currents that shape our world. After centuries of hidden guidance, secret alliances, and symbols woven into every layer of human civilization, the serpent's ultimate revelation emerges. Influence, knowledge, and power are inseparable from responsibility. The threads we have traced, from ancient temples to modern institutions, from guardians of knowledge to the subtle flow of power, converge into a singular understanding. The world as we know it is not merely shaped by visible events, but by unseen hands guided by wisdom, foresight, and ethical reflection. To see this is to perceive history differently, to understand that outcomes we once considered inevitable were often carefully orchestrated through subtle, deliberate, and ethically nuanced action. The emotional weight of this realization is profound. It is awe-inspiring to consider that civilizations, revolutions, and human progress were quietly guided by principles coiled within the serpent's teachings. It is sobering to recognize that missteps, misinterpretations, or ethical lapses carried consequences that rippled across generations, shaping the lives of millions. And it is humbling to know that the responsibility of influence, whether wielded knowingly or unknowingly, has always demanded wisdom, patience, and ethical discernment. The serpent teaches that insight is a privilege, guidance a duty, and foresight an ethical obligation. Reflection brings the understanding that the serpent's influence is not static. It is a living, evolving force, adapting to societies, technologies, and human behavior. From encoded symbols in ancient manuscripts to strategic coordination in modern global institutions, the principles remain remarkably consistent: discretion, patience, ethical stewardship, and foresight. The forms change, the context shifts, yet the underlying wisdom endures, proving that influence is less about immediacy and visibility and more about enduring, responsible action that reverberates through time. This revelation also challenges how we perceive leadership, history, and decision-making. Leaders are rarely solitary actors. Their choices are informed by networks, advisors, and accumulated knowledge encoded across generations. What appears as chance, genius, or catastrophe is often a reflection of adherence, or failure to adhere, to these hidden principles. Recognizing the serpent's influence reshapes our understanding of success and failure, progress and decline, and highlights the profound interplay between visible action and hidden guidance. The philosophical dimension is equally striking. The serpent embodies duality, reward and consequence, visibility and concealment, wisdom and responsibility. It reminds us that power is never neutral. It carries ethical weight. Influence, whether public or hidden, shapes lives, societies, and futures. Guardians of knowledge understood this, cultivating wisdom and ethical discernment alongside strategic skill. Their work preserved civilizations, mitigated disasters, and ensured that the flow of hidden guidance remained aligned with principles capable of sustaining societies over centuries. Modern viewers, confronted with this revelation, are invited into reflection. What unseen forces shape the policies, markets, and cultural narratives that govern daily life? How do symbols, alliances, and subtle guidance influence decisions without our awareness? And perhaps most profoundly, what role do we play within these currents, whether as participants, observers, or interpreters? The Serpent's teachings are a mirror, urging us to examine not only the world, but our place within it, our capacity for ethical influence, and our responsibility toward knowledge and action. Emotionally, this moment of clarity is both empowering and daunting. Empowering because the principles of foresight, ethical responsibility, and coordinated influence are accessible to those who cultivate wisdom and perception. Daunting because the consequences of misapplication, oversight, or ignorance are significant, shaping lives, institutions, and even history itself. The Serpent's presence is a constant reminder that understanding carries responsibility, insight carries duty, and foresight carries ethical obligation. In conclusion, the Serpent's ultimate lesson is clear. Influence is a living, dynamic force, intertwined with ethics, strategy, and responsibility. It moves through generations, shaping outcomes subtly yet decisively, encoded in symbols, alliances, cultural narratives, and strategic decisions. Guardians of knowledge ensure continuity, ethical application, and preservation of wisdom, enabling civilizations to navigate uncertainty, seize opportunity, and avoid catastrophe. The consequences of misalignment, however, remain equally potent, emphasizing that power, guidance, and wisdom are inseparable from responsibility. As the documentary draws to a close, we are left with a profound question. What if the unseen currents of influence we have explored today continue to shape our world, silently guiding decisions, perceptions, and destinies? What if recognizing them allows us not only to understand history differently, but to participate consciously in shaping the future? The Serpent's teachings challenge us to observe, reflect, and act responsibly, demonstrating that awareness is both a privilege and an ethical imperative. Finally, the Serpent's legacy becomes personal. Each viewer, consciously or unconsciously, is part of this continuum of influence, absorbing, interpreting, and potentially applying the principles of foresight, discretion, and ethical guidance. The revelation is that the hidden currents of history are not distant abstractions. They are active, coiling through the present, shaping the lives of all who inhabit it. By understanding, reflecting, and engaging with these principles, we participate in an enduring flow of wisdom that has persisted for millennia, bridging past, present, and future. In the quiet reflection that follows, the viewer is left with awe, curiosity, and a subtle sense of responsibility. The Serpent's journey is not merely an exploration of history. It is an invitation to ethical action, strategic thinking, and mindful influence. Its lessons are coiled in every decision, every alliance, every symbol, and every act of leadership. Recognizing them transforms perception, deepens understanding, and fosters a sense of connection to a hidden lineage of wisdom that continues to shape the world in ways both profound and invisible. Thus concludes the journey through the hidden order of the Serpent, a journey through secrecy, wisdom, strategy, ethics, and human consequence. Its legacy persists, invisible yet undeniable, coiled through history, guiding civilizations, shaping leaders, and challenging every observer to reflect. How will you recognize the currents that shape your world, and how will you act within them? Even after centuries of study, reflection, and revelation, the Serpent's influence continues to coil through time, unseen yet undeniable. Its legacy is not confined to history. It moves within the present and anticipates the future. The principles of wisdom, foresight, and ethical influence are eternal, encoded not just in symbols or architecture, but in the decisions, actions, and perceptions of every human being who chooses to observe carefully and act responsibly. The serpent's lesson is clear: knowledge without foresight is incomplete, and power without ethical guidance is perilous. The eternal coil represents the unbroken flow of wisdom across generations. Each act of ethical leadership, each carefully guided decision, each subtle application of insight contributes to this continuum. From the guardians of ancient temples to contemporary advisors and thinkers, every node in this chain reinforces the principles of foresight, discretion, and responsibility. History's great civilizations, its fleeting empires, and even its anonymous individuals bear witness to the ripple effects of this continuous coil, revealing that influence is never isolated. It is cumulative, interconnected, and enduring. Symbols, once merely decorative or mystical, take on new significance in this eternal context. Coiled patterns, serpentine imagery, and hidden motifs are more than art. They are vessels of timeless guidance. They remind us that wisdom can survive chaos, revolution, and the passage of centuries. They guide perception, instill ethical reflection, and preserve strategic knowledge, ensuring that lessons of the past are not lost, but adapted for new circumstances. The serpent's coil is both metaphorical and literal, visible in symbols yet intangible in its influence. The ethical dimension remains central. Guardians of knowledge have long understood that influence is inseparable from responsibility. Decisions, whether personal, institutional, or global, carry consequences that echo across time. Those who act with foresight, restraint, and ethical clarity perpetuate the positive flow of the serpent's legacy. Those who act impulsively, selfishly, or unethically disrupt the coil, generating unforeseen consequences that reverberate far beyond immediate perception. The eternal coil teaches that influence is not neutral. It is an ethical force that demands discernment and reflection. Psychologically, the eternal coil shapes human behavior and perception. Awareness of unseen currents fosters humility, patience, and strategic insight. It encourages reflection on choices, alignment of intention with action, and the cultivation of foresight. Even individuals who may never consciously engage with historical symbols or secret networks are subtly guided by cultural, social, and structural patterns shaped by the serpent's influence. This interplay between visible action and hidden guidance demonstrates the enduring power of ethical wisdom encoded across generations. The eternal coil is also a reminder of continuity and resilience. Civilizations rise and fall, leaders succeed and fail, but the principles of foresight, discretion, and moral guidance persist. Knowledge is preserved, transmitted, and applied, ensuring that societies can navigate uncertainty, avoid catastrophic missteps, and harness opportunity responsibly. The coil is unbroken because it adapts, evolving with context, culture, and circumstance, yet retaining its essential purpose, guiding action with wisdom and ethical awareness. Culturally, the serpent continues to influence art, literature, and symbolism. Its presence permeates narratives, shapes morality, and inspires reflection. From ancient myths to contemporary storytelling, the serpent embodies transformation, vigilance, and insight. These cultural imprints serve as invisible mentors, reminding societies of the enduring principles of strategy, ethics, and foresight. Through this lens, the coil is both a narrative and practical force, teaching without words and shaping behavior subtly yet decisively. Strategically, the coil manifests in governance, alliances, and decision-making. Coordinated networks, whether political, academic, or corporate, reflect centuries of accumulated wisdom. Leaders who understand these hidden currents can anticipate outcomes, align strategies, and act responsibly. The serpent's eternal lesson is that foresight and subtle influence yield outcomes far more sustainable and ethical than brute force or immediate action. Influence is most effective when it flows seamlessly through time, connecting past, present, and future. The philosophical weight of the eternal coil is profound. It challenges assumptions about history, leadership, and human agency. It urges reflection on the unseen forces that shape events, the ethical responsibility embedded in knowledge, and the enduring consequences of action. The serpent's coil is a reminder that power is not merely to be wielded, but to be understood, applied, and reflected upon with care. It compels viewers to consider their role in the ongoing flow of influence and the moral implications of every choice. In conclusion, the eternal coil provides a final revelation. History, culture, and human experience are entwined with hidden currents of wisdom and influence. The serpent is both guide and guardian, its lessons coiled through time, shaping thought, action, and consequence. Its presence reminds us that understanding, ethical application, and foresight are not merely historical concerns. They are imperatives for the present and future. Each of us participates in this continuum, whether consciously or unconsciously, shaping the coil with every decision, every act of reflection, and every ethical choice. As the documentary draws to its close, viewers are left with a sense of continuity, awe, and responsibility. The serpent's coil is eternal, invisible yet potent, guiding civilization, inspiring reflection, and reminding us that wisdom, foresight, and ethical action are the true markers of influence. Its lesson is timeless: to recognize the unseen, act with discernment, and carry responsibility for the ripple effects of every choice. The eternal coil persists, inviting us to observe, reflect, and participate consciously in the shaping of our world. As we reach the end of our journey, one question lingers: what lies beyond the serpent? The hidden currents of influence, the guardians of knowledge, and the eternal coil of wisdom are not confined to the past. They continue into the future, shaping societies, decisions, and human destiny. To understand the serpent is not only to understand history, but to glimpse the enduring architecture of influence, the unseen patterns that guide action, and the ethical responsibilities that accompany insight. Its presence challenges us to look beyond the obvious, to recognize the subtle forces shaping our world, and to ask, what will we do with the wisdom we inherit? The serpent, in its essence, is a teacher of perspective. It reveals that history is never purely linear or random. Every revolution, empire, and cultural shift is connected to unseen networks of influence, subtle guidance, and ethical reflection. Understanding this changes the way we view success, failure, and human progress. It encourages humility, patience, and awareness, reminding us that actions rarely exist in isolation. Each decision, no matter how small, participates in a web of cause and effect that stretches across generations. The serpent's lesson is that foresight is a responsibility, not a privilege. Beyond the historical and philosophical, the serpent's influence is deeply personal. It urges introspection, reflection, and deliberate action. We are each, in some measure, participants in the ongoing flow of influence through our choices, our interactions, and the values we embody. Recognizing this invites accountability, to act ethically, to apply knowledge wisely, and to consider the consequences of our actions beyond immediate results. The serpent teaches that awareness is transformative, shaping not only outcomes, but character, perception, and understanding. The legacy extends to modern society in tangible ways. Politics, commerce, culture, and technology are shaped by networks, mentorships, and invisible patterns reminiscent of the serpent's teachings. Alliances form silently, decisions are guided subtly, and outcomes ripple through systems often unnoticed. Those attuned to these currents can navigate complexity with foresight, while those unaware may find themselves swept along by forces they cannot perceive. The serpent's presence is proof that influence, whether overt or hidden, continues to shape civilization, making historical understanding a guide for present and future action. Yet the serpent also warns of complacency. Influence is not inherently benign, and knowledge is never neutral. Misuse, neglect, or ethical compromise can create consequences that echo across generations. Those who ignore responsibility or fail to apply wisdom with foresight risk repeating historical mistakes, amplifying error, or unintentionally shaping outcomes toward harm. The serpent's lesson is clear. Insight demands action, and ethical foresight is inseparable from influence itself. To understand without responsibility is to invite imbalance. Philosophically, the serpent challenges perception of human agency. While unseen currents guide outcomes, individual and collective action remain central. Wisdom, ethical reflection, and strategic insight are tools for navigating these currents. The serpent illustrates that influence is a partnership between knowledge and action, between hidden guidance and conscious choice. We are neither powerless nor entirely independent. We are participants in an ongoing dialogue between history, ethics, and foresight. Emotionally, this final reflection evokes awe, curiosity, and responsibility. Understanding the serpent's enduring presence instills a sense of connection to the continuum of human wisdom. It fosters humility, reminding us that we are part of a much larger narrative, shaped by forces we can perceive only with careful observation. Yet it also inspires empowerment. By recognizing these patterns, by cultivating discernment and ethical foresight, we can participate consciously in shaping outcomes, influencing others positively, and preserving the wisdom of the ages. Culturally and symbolically, the serpent continues to resonate. From myths and literature to rituals and artistic expression, it embodies transformation, vigilance, and insight. These symbols are more than decorative. They're tools for reflection, guides for ethical action, and reminders of the coiled continuity of knowledge across generations. The serpent's presence is a call to awareness, urging each of us to engage thoughtfully with history, culture, and the invisible frameworks that shape our world. Finally, beyond the serpent lies the future, a landscape shaped by the choices, wisdom, and foresight of those who recognize the hidden currents of influence. History, knowledge, and ethical responsibility converge into a living continuum, where every action has potential and every decision carries consequence. The serpent's teachings invite us to participate with mindfulness, humility, and courage, to look beyond the visible, to act ethically, and to preserve wisdom for those who follow is to honor the coiled legacy that has shaped humanity across centuries. As the documentary concludes, viewers are left with a sense of reflection, awe, and possibility. The serpent's influence is eternal, invisible yet profound, guiding civilizations, shaping thought, and challenging us to recognize our role in the ongoing flow of wisdom. Its lesson is timeless. Awareness, foresight, and ethical action are not merely historical observations. They are imperatives for shaping the present and future. The serpent coils beyond what we can see. Its influence is within reach of those willing to observe, reflect, and act consciously. The ultimate question remains: if the hidden currents that have shaped history continue to flow, how will we engage with them? What choices will we make, knowing that wisdom, foresight, and ethical responsibility are not abstract ideals, but living forces that ripple through time? The serpent's answer is subtle, but profound. Act with discernment, uphold responsibility, and participate consciously in the eternal coil of influence. And in doing so, we honor the lessons of the past while shaping the course of the future.